Welcome back, everybody. It has been a long time since I've streamed, and a long time since we done this show. This is TALKO Tuesdays, where I interview someone, in this case my friend GIGI, about a particular topic we've been discussing over the course of a week or maybe 2 weeks at this point, honestly. But if the title didn't already give it away, we're going to talk about the latest Star Wars show, The Acolyte, which I believe finished like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So we're going to talk about this and specifically some very cold takes um, that we've heard about this show. But before we jump into it, Gigi, feel free to introduce yourself, anything you're doing, any projects you're working on. I don't think there's much, but if there is, let us know.
Yep. My name is Gigi. I am just a regular old entertainment nerd of different persuasions. No real projects I'm working on right now. But
Yeah.
just here to chat.
All right. Awesome. Well, we've both been talking about this through Facebook and other apps and stuff like that. Because I put you on, I put a lot of people on to
Yeah.
a specific video from a film critic on YouTube. This film critic is Filmento, who I used to watch all the time. Like, I watched his videos, I respected the takes he had on certain movies, didn't respect the takes he had on some others, but, that's the way film criticism goes. But he came out with this one, and this one in particular made me just lose respect for him entirely. Um,
Yep.
and I think we share a lot of the same reasons because we've talked about that, but I'll just get into the biggest one up front. First and foremost, he did not finish the show. And
Right.
if anyone wants to check that, like if anyone thinks I'm quoting him out of context or, taking what he said the wrong way, just watch like the end of his video. Because he all but admits he did not finish this show. And the reason I want to get that out of the way first is that ties in to so much more of his criticism about this show, right? And I'm gonna kick this off. You're gonna have more than ample time to say your piece, Gigi. But um,
Yep.
the the thing that annoyed me most about this interview is it seems like what Phil Mento was doing is crafting this sort of almost fanfic level premise in his head of what he
Mm-hmm.
wanted the show to be, and
Mm-hmm.
because the show wasn't that, he didn't like it. And it's
Yes.
based literally like on episode 1, right?
Yes.
Where it's, oh, well, there's this Jedi assassin and she's out there killing Jedi, and it would be a cool show if it was like, oh, well, you've got these two twin sisters and one of them is out there killing Jedi and the other one's got to clear her name by tracking down her twin sister and stopping her from killing Jedi, and that would have been a cool show.
Right.
And to me, that's a really fucking boring show, honestly.
Right.
And the only reason it's boring is because we've seen the same thing done over and over and over again. Maybe not in the context
Exactly.
of Star Wars, but we've seen it in tons and tons of other movies and TV shows.
Yep.
Um, and he's going on about things like, oh, well, she didn't like sneak attack Indara or Torben. And it's like, well, because she's not actually an assassin. She
Right.
wants to fight these people face to face. That
Right.
is her entire goal, is to fight them face to face, and as her master tells her, try to find out how to kill one without using a weapon, right?
Right.
And she's
Right.
frustrated because she can't figure that puzzle out, right? To the point that she just straight up like fights Indara, just murders her, right?
Right.
And then when she gets to Torben, it's like, oh, well, he's in this meditative state. He's got this force field around him. Force field being a pun in Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then she like goes at it, and a large part of his video was complaining about that. Oh, why didn't she sneak up on him? Well, because he's got the fucking force field, my guy.
No,
Like,
no.
and then
I
she's,
honestly felt like I was being gaslit at one point. 'Cause I was
oh
like,
yeah,
"Wow, this is crazy." Like some of the
yes,
criticisms are crazy. Like I think okay, so first of all, it's like to start to dislike a show because you misunderstood the premise. I actually had to stop at that point because I was like, I don't know that I even really knew really what this show was about. Like I don't think I paid attention to the premises. Like I just kind of went in blind. So maybe that's like why that's not resonating with me is I know that there was this long expectation for this show like in stages
mm-hmm.
and but then he says before that he's not really a Star Wars fan. So I don't understand where that expectation, if he's not a fan, would have come from if he wasn't following the news of the show. So, but I don't think that because the show took a shift tonally from what you expected it to be, that is not a valid criticism.
Yeah.
He said it's like a break in the story engine. No, it's not. There is still, tension driving the story. It's just not the tension that you thought it would be of her trying to clear her name. But that's not that's not a valid critique. Like, I'm sorry it wasn't what you thought it was gonna be. Like,
Yeah. Well, that broke my brain too, because it's like you fundamentally misunderstand a work when you do not understand the premise of that work, right? It's like when you're reading an essay. If you don't understand the author's theme of that essay, then you don't understand the essay itself. Nothing makes sense following that introduction.
Exactly.
And so it's strange to me that he had this take of like, well, here's what I wanted the show to be, and it wasn't that, and therefore show bad.
Right.
I mean,
and then he sort of demonstrates his lack of understanding of it too, because he then goes on to say that, that the main story engine was broken by the fact that her name was cleared so quickly, and then she just really had no reason to be with the Jedi while they were hunting down May. She was just kind of tagging along, and she wasn't moving the story at that point. The story was moving her. And I was like, but did you miss the whole part where she says that she wants to confront her sister for what she did to her family? Like, she thought May was dead. So now the story engine here is her trying to confront her sister. And the Jedi are very leery of letting her do that, but they sort of need her to draw May out of hiding. But that is the tension at that point. So the tension of the story really becomes, and I think ends with, kind of reconciling with what happened to her family. It is what drove her out of training. It is what drove her pursuit of May. And it's what drives, where it ends up with Soul and what happens to Soul. So I think that is the theme of the show. And just because you thought it was going to be some kind of like innocence proving storyline doesn't mean that there's no story engine driving the story. And I thought that was a huge miss on his part in that criticism.
No, it's a massive miss, because even if I take out all of that, right, the simple fact of the matter is that in film, or really in any plot-driven form of media,
right.
Yes, characters need to have agency and need to drive the plot forward, but the plot also needs to exist separate from the characters, right?
Right.
And so, like, you have to have a plot for the characters to move through, or you don't have a story. So they're vehicles for one another. There is, and what makes a good story is that balance. Something happens that drives the character forward. The character does something that then drives the story forward. Like, those are two sides of the same coin, really.
Right.
And so this idea that, Osha has zero agency throughout the story and just lets the plot sort of carry her along is just a big miss. Like, it is just 100% false to me.
Right. There are several points where she makes choices, you know, like there at first when, and the thing is like, he even brings up this line. It's like when she was like, okay, well, I've cleared my name. This isn't my business now. That would have been sort of being carried along by circumstances, but she makes a choice to return. Yeah. She's like, no, I want to pursue this and see this through. Right. Like, I don't understand how you could quote one side of that event and then leave the other out and then say she's just being carried along by the story when she made that decision on her own independently, Yeah.
Well, I find this as a common trend. I talked to someone about this today because I was talking to them about the Acolyte today. I find this as a common trend among people who just lack media literacy in general, is they don't have the ability to put themselves in the character's shoes and to see things from their perspective, right? And so the thing about a lot of characters we watch in TV shows and movies is they're fucking insane. Like, they do shit that just doesn't make sense to a rational person. Like, so if I put myself in the shoes of someone like Osha, okay, I've got a twin out there. She murdered a Jedi. Jedi are super important people in this galaxy, and murdering one probably comes with something equivalent to a death penalty, right?
Right.
Then as soon as I got my name cleared, I'd be like, all right, peace, I'm out.
Exactly.
Like,
Right.
but
Especially when you went to like, I think people. I think it's been so long. And granted, I actually normally don't like characters like this, so I sort of get it. But this character that just wants to be normal, right? I
yeah,
think it's been so long that we focused on these in like really eccentric characters, let's say, that we've forgotten about these characters that just want to be normal. And the thing is like the reality is that a lot of the portrayals of these characters that just want to be normal aren't very good because somehow they still end up in these they still make these deliberate choices to end up in these very extraordinary circumstances in ways but she really is just trying to be normal. Like,
yes,
like I really want to go back to being normal. Like,
and that's
but
the
the only reason is because now my sister is alive who I thought was dead. I mean, that's a huge,
yeah,
who could go back to being normal after that, right? Like you kind
exactly.
of have to go figure out what the fuck is going on. Like
Exactly, but it's the same draw that horror movies have, right? Is like if we talk about like Jason, for example, right? Friday the
Mhm.
13th, right? We're talking about an instance in where like so many teenagers go to the same exact camp on the same exact lake where they've heard that teenagers like just a year before got murdered en masse.
Right,
And they
right.
do that because they're attracted to the mystery, not
Yeah,
because they're attracted to the camp or the lake or they know what's going to happen there, but because they want to
right,
discover this mystery, and this mystery turns out to be like an immortal murderer. So,
right, right.
like, but it's just weird to me that people cannot draw those connections between different pieces of media that they're watching. And
Yes.
I say it's weird to me, but it's really not, because now I kind of understand. Is after talking to somebody about this a day, I know what these people who call themselves Star Wars fans are really looking for. And I say they call themselves Star Wars fans because they're attracted to the aesthetic of Star Wars. They're not
Mm-hmm.
attracted to anything about Star Wars, though.
Yeah.
What they want to see is Jedi Sith whoosh whoosh cool laser sword fight, right?
Yes.
They want to see clear divides between good versus evil. They want to see, okay, here's our new Emperor Palpatine, and here's our Luke
Yeah.
Skywalker who's going to beat him up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what they
I
want
mean,
to see.
exactly. He actually does mention this too, in the sense that, he was like, well, Osha's just not very special or talented. And it's
Hmm.
like, I think that I think this comes from some of the fact of that this is a generation, our generation that grew up with the prequels. And so our ideas of Star Wars were somewhat fundamentally shaped by the prequels and the idea that Anakin was special. But
Yeah.
that was like a really unique thing, right? Like,
Hmm.
because, Luke wasn't very special. Like, I think he wasn't very talented. Like,
He
it
wasn't.
took him a while to get there.
He
Like, let's talk
wasn't.
about.
I mean,
But
people.
I think Star Wars is full of characters that aren't necessarily very talented. Like
There.
Anakin is a unique circumstance, and not every Star Wars hero needs to be super special and talented.
Yes.
Like especially when she's trying not to be. Like this is the person who gave up that life and literally, like I said, is just trying to be normal. Like
Yeah.
why would she be? It would be more unbelievable for her to be particularly special and talented.
Well,
Like
that's
more than just being strong in the force, right?
yes, and that's the thing I don't think people understand about Star Wars, though, is that every time someone gets to be special in Star Wars, what happens? Like
Yeah,
half of the fucking galaxy gets destroyed. Like every
exactly.
single fucking time.
Exactly.
Right? Is like, okay, Anakin gets to be special. What happens? Galactic
Mm-hmm.
Empire. Kylo Ren
Mm-hmm.
gets to be special. What happens? The First Order blows up the New Republic.
Yes. But they're
Right?
obsessed with that special, talented, and white man. Like they love that. I don't even
Yes.
think if she had been special at that caliber, which again wouldn't make sense, I think they would have still been unhappy with it
But
because it's not a special white man.
we know that because that goes
But
back to the drama surrounding Rey and Daisy Ridley, right?
exactly.
Is Daisy Ridley's a Mary Sue who has all these special abilities and can do no wrong and so on and so forth, and she never had any training and so on and so forth. Luke
Right.
sucked as a Jedi when he first picked up a lightsaber. The scene
Right.
of him pointing the lightsaber at his own face has been memed to death.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
it's the equivalent of giving someone a gun for the first time and them shoving the muzzle up their nose.
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly. Exactly.
you know,
Which tangent an ADHD brain, but that actually reminds me of when Chimere put that saber up to Mei's head like a
hmm
gun. That was cool. That
oh
was a
yeah.
really cool use of that, and a really cool illustration of that point that you're making.
Yeah, It's a callback to the scene in what was it, episode 8, where they're
Yeah.
fighting like the palace guards in front of
Right.
Snoke's corpse.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just cool to me because it's like people often forget lightsabers work that way. Lightsabers are not swords, people. I want you to understand
Right.
that.
Right.
Like lightsabers are not swords. In fact, people who
Yeah.
like turn on lightsabers should be instantly blinded and melted at the same time. So,
Mm-hmm.
but anyway, beyond that, it what I'm saying, I understand where their criticism is coming from because they want Star Wars to be that surface level thing. They want another hero's journey, is what they want.
Right. And so, okay, I could really go on a deep dive tangent about this. To be fair, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Okay, when George Lucas created the first, episode 4, 5, 6, right? He did fundamentally draw. There's actually a documentary or something. There's a book and a documentary based on the book called The Power of Myth that talks about these myths.
So we get the travesty that is episode 9.
Yeah.
So, but the Acolyte is that experiment done all over again, right?
Yeah.
It is that playing with the idea that, okay, not all dark side users may be evil, or at least they do not perceive themselves that way, right?
Right.
Not all Jedi are good people.
And I think that's the problem a lot of people had with it. Like, I was talking to my dad about it. My dad is a big sci-fi fan, so I trust his takes a little more than random people on the internet,
Yeah.
And he did have some criticisms for the show. One of them to me was unfair, and it's just him, right? But he was like, he didn't like to see the Jedi so fallible,
Yeah.
And I was like, that's what I loved about it. I thought that this has been a theme that I think that should have been revisited since the prequels, that just never was. And I was especially disappointed to see the sequel films, how they didn't revisit that theme, because in the sequel books that were made, totally irrelevant actually by the movies, Luke does address some of those fallibilities in the old Jedi Order and in his reinvention of the new Jedi Order, but that never does get addressed. And so I was like, we need to talk about this. Like, the Jedi were not perfect. Like, let's
Yeah. Well, that gets addressed in the prequels. It gets addressed in the sequels. It gets addressed all throughout EU canon. That the Jedi Order was never a perfect thing. That they were too dogmatic in their devotion to the light.
Yes, and it's so surprising to me. So then people to see this show and then be like, "Oh, well, that's too far." I'm like, "Are we talking about the same Jedi? Have we been watching the same things?" Like, I'm confused.
Exactly. And I don't.
Jedi were perfect, And they're like, I saw one criticism. They're like, well, why are the Jedi so like emotional? I was like, because the whole idea of trying to put emotion aside is a problem. Like, it's not sustainable, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that is the point. Like, Jedi have always struggled with this. This isn't even the first time. Like, I don't.
No, yeah. Well, that's the thing. They wonder why Jedi are so emotional. One, they're fucking people, my guy. Like, what do you expect? Like, they're not robots. They are people.
Right.
And even if they are robots in Star Wars, it doesn't fucking matter because droids have emotions too. But,
Right.
But and then they want to pull out examples. I've seen them pull out so many examples. Well, look at people like Mace Windu, and look at people like Ki-Adi-Mundi, and look at Plo Koon, and look at Yoda. Right.
Right.
And I'm like,
right.
I'm sorry, do you know what the fuck you're talking about? Because I've read so many stories about these specific Jedi, and they are highly fucking emotional people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, first of all, just go to the fight scene between Yoda and Sidious and tell me that feral scream that comes out of Yoda's mouth isn't a display of emotion. Like,
right.
Like, please, tell me that isn't. The fact of the matter is, yes, Jedi are emotional, but their dogma says we need to suppress this. And don't.
These are specific people who have walked further along the path of managing their emotions.
Yeah.
But they are exceptions, not I wouldn't say the rule. And it's interesting that they are exceptions when the rule is to do what they do, but they are not. Well, they're sort of like a lot of Jedi don't go as far or come as close as they did to achieving that goal.
They literally cannot be the rule. Because by the time we get to what we know as like the last Jedi Order, the last full established order on Coruscant, Yoda is the Grand Master of this order. Yoda by that time has lived for thousands of years.
Yeah.
So no one else can even, but that's the standard that all Jedi are held to, but it's impossible to meet that standard unless you find another race, another sentient race that also lives as long as Yoda, because he's had that time, he's had that wisdom and experience to be like that ultimate Buddhist monk, to sit there and say like, oh, I have all my emotions in check, right? Versus someone like Obi-Wan in Episode 1, who doesn't have all his emotions in check, who comes very close to the dark side in his duel against Maul because he just watched his master die.
Yeah,
right?
no, it's fascinating because in that argument, I was kind of the person who was like, the Jedi are so emotional in this show. I was like, so who's an example of a Jedi who wasn't emotional? And they're like, Yoda. I was like, okay, I'll give that to you, but yes, they are mitigating circumstances, as you mentioned. But then they said Obi-Wan, and I was like, bro, my brother in Christ.
Go back and watch the.
Right now. Be fucking for real, like.
Fucking watch the Obi-Wan show.
That's crazy.
Don't even. In fact, no. Don't watch the Obi-Wan show. Fucking, the quotable lines from Star Wars, right?
Right.
You're like a brother to me, Anakin.
Exactly.
It was foretold you would destroy the Sith, not join them. I'm sorry, that man is screaming and weeping on the side of a fucking active volcano planet.
Literally having a full-blown meltdown. Like, I just don't. I wonder. It's crazy, some of the arguments that I've heard, and I feel like people have deliberately twisted it in their mind to suit their agenda and just overlooking facts. Like they're just deeply emotional.
They are, but this is the thing: is those people LARP as Jedi. They LARP as this idealized Jedi who has all his emotions in check and is this perfect warrior monk. Right. They want, the only reason that they levy that criticism is because that is an ideal they set for themselves, and they're mad that it's not reflected in the media that they got the idea from. And
the thing is, like, I don't understand that, because yes, you get that idealized version of the Jedi in the first original trilogy because they are a dead order, right? Like, you have this idea, you get this legend of them, essentially, of them being this like perfect warrior order. But I feel like the prequels blow all of that out of the water, and we really don't get that back since. So it's like, to me, the way the Jedi are portrayed in the Acolyte are very in line with how they are in the prequels. Like, I really don't see any difference at all. And I'm shocked that people do, like, were we watching the same things?
No, that's the thing, is they either don't understand or they do not want to understand. There's a phrase we use in political science, which is, you are not immune to propaganda.
Right.
And that's really the problem with people who have this view of Jedi in Star Wars, is they don't understand that the original trilogy, what Obi-Wan says about Jedi to Luke at the time, is not like the ultimate truth. This is not like gospel about the Jedi. This is the propaganda that Obi-Wan believes about the Jedi. Right?
Exactly.
And he's carrying it on, like you said, as a legend of the Jedi, because the Jedi Order does not exist at this time, as far as we're aware, when the original trilogy comes out, right? And that's the thing, is like, people don't understand the original trilogy itself isn't gospel, because this was George Lucas making it up. So
yes, and I think I on that point, I really think so. I feel like, hold on, I feel like before I go into this tangent, this will be a long tangent. Is there anything else that we wanted to say about Filmento's review?
I'll say a couple other things, because I want to dive into what I discovered in his comment sections, because my this is like the most notifications I've had on YouTube in years. Was going to his comment sections. I want to. There was a couple like just really dumb criticisms I saw in general, and these weren't even from his comments. These were just kind of spread across the internet. One is like one of the very first scenes that happens in the Acolyte, where Osha is working on a ship, and one of the panels on the ship like burst into flames, and they're like, "Oh, how could fire happen in space?" George Lucas, yes,
that was unbelievable. Like, how many times have we seen fire in space in Star Wars? It's known for it. In fact, I think that there have been other. In fact, I would argue that Interstellar was like a criticism of these. It was a backhanded criticism of these space opera epics, of which Star Wars is a pillar.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Where you do see fire in space. And Interstellar's
Absolutely.
like, you guys are dumb.
That's
But
because
everybody does it, and his brain done it. So like
Interstellar
this is
was.
not me. Like
Yes. Interstellar's mission statement was like, this is science fiction and what you guys are doing is science fantasy. Like, and everyone kind of retorted with like, well, no shit, we know.
And we don't care. I love science fantasy. I love fantasy. I love science fiction. All y'all pay your little quarters. It's gonna be okay.
But that's the crazy. So they went on about this like fire and space thing, and they try to blow it up into like this big criticism of the Acolyte in particular. And it's like, okay, what was Alderaan getting blown up? What was the Death Star explosion? What was the thousands of ships we've seen blow up? You know, all of that is fire and space, my guy. Like, I don't know how else to put it to you. The other criticism we kind of already touched on was this idea that Anakin isn't special anymore. And I just want to say, it doesn't matter what the fuck you say at this point. Anakin is the single most influential character in all of Star Wars canon. He has changed the galaxy from his birth to his death. He has changed the galaxy on a fundamental level.
Yeah.
Right?
And the thing is that everything about this is different. The only thing that is in common with Anakin is the fact that they don't have a father. But everything about the implementation of that is different. And I feel like it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of why Anakin is special.
Yes. Anakin is special because of what he did, not because of the circumstances of his birth.
But even the circumstances of his birth, we can look at that. Like, I think it's interesting, especially to hint at more than hint, but just do a little suggestion there of Darth Plagueis, because I feel like what they could be is an inspiration for the road that led to Anakin, right? Of what some of the experiments they were doing with creating life with the Force. That could have been the beginning of that inspiration. But regardless is that even the circumstances of his birth are still very different. The only commonality is that he didn't have a father. But they have two parents, right? They have a creator and a bearer. Different already, right? Like, they weren't prophesized. Different already. I checked that prophecy. The prophecy does specifically say the prophesized person would be male. Different already. It says he, singular, not they. Okay, it's different already. Like, I don't understand. And what's so embarrassing about that is that it just shows this like weird fear and like being protective over this like special snowflake white male character, which is like, don't get me wrong, like I honestly do love Anakin. First of all, I love bad guys, always have. So I do love Anakin, but to be so weirdly defensive over him is embarrassing.
It is. I mean, really I'll just say it. Vader is my single favorite character in Star Wars. The comic panel of him saying all I'm surrounded by is fear and dead men is like, that has been my wallpaper several times. Vader is the embodiment of badassery. And I love him for it. And again, he is the single most influential character in all of Star Wars canon. You can go back to EU content. You can bring up Darth Bane. You can bring up Revan to me. You can bring up all these fucking people in past Star Wars history to me. It doesn't fucking matter. Anakin is the guy, right? He is that fucking guy.
That's what's so weird about me. Like, there's nothing touching that legacy, right? And so to be so protective over these weird little similar details when there's still no way that you could elevate Osha or Anne May to that level, right? It's weird. It's fucking weird.
I mean, they can't. That's the thing, is they don't understand, like, Osha and May are really interesting and fun characters. I love them for that, right?
I do too. Yeah.
But no, there is no character that's ever going to be at Vader's level. Ever in Star Wars, right? Not unless they want to break the whole fucking machine.
Yes.
It's...
Even my grandson wasn't at that level. Like, let's be fucking... Like...
I mean, let's be... If we go back to, like... We'll go back to this, right? We'll go to the sometimes maligned Force Awakens games. Starkiller in those games, insanely powerful Force user. Born and bred, like, raised by Vader himself to be the thing that was going to kill Palpatine, right? And now Starkiller kind of exists as a meme because he was so ridiculously powerful.
Right.
But then by the end of by the end of game 1, you find out just how much more powerful Vader actually is than Starkiller himself. So it doesn't really fucking matter. Like, Vader, again, is that guy.
Yes. Yes.
And the last thing I'll just, well, one of the last things I'll just bring up here is this idea that the Sith are supposed to be extinct by the time that this story takes place, because it is Old Republic era. And before Old Republic, for those of you who like are coming into Star Wars and you just know the TV and movies, there was a very, very long war, many, many wars. Like, the series is called Star Wars for a reason, but many, many wars between Sith and Jedi in past eras, that ended up with the Jedi Order eventually thinking, this is important, operative word, thinking that they wiped out the Sith. Yes. And that is because at one time the Sith were an actual race of people. Then other people started showing up on their planet and adopting their ways and calling themselves the Sith. And then that's when the war breaks out, right? And the Sith Empire falls, and the Republic is established, right?
Right.
So we get this Old Republic, and everyone's like, oh, the Sith are supposed to be extinct. Not fucking true, and it's not even true by EU canon, because at this time, there are Sith who we read about who exist.
and logically cannot be true, because, but anyway, let me start with this. What I will, the criticism that I will accept, that I feel like what happened is these sort of like bandwagon haters heard and then twisted a little too far, is that it is true that canonically the Jedi are not supposed to know that the Sith exist at this moment that the show takes place. So when he reveals himself as a Sith, when Chimera reveals himself as a Sith to Soul, right, that is the sort of supposedly canon-breaking event. But it's like, just fucking watch the show. Just wait. Yeah. Okay? He hasn't run back to the Jedi Council to be like, the Sith are back, right? So, like, just wait.
Yes.
Just wait.
And it's implied.
And then, of course, by the time you get to the end of the show, you see that, yes, they don't know that information doesn't get out, because everybody that he revealed it to is dead.
Everyone they revealed it to is dead, or in this case, hiding it, because they do not want to cause another galactic panic. They understand that if the news that Sith are back gets around, like, that is a whole nother war that's going to happen.
And even so I would say still just, I mean, I like, Venestra is the only buddy who's suspicious, right? But even she is just like, my student turned to evil. I don't even think that she knows how far that evil goes. I don't think she's kept track of him, so I still think that it's still very much in line with canon because of that.
But that's the back edge of the sword, right? Is that what people I don't know why people seem to have forgotten this fact when it comes to this show in particular, but not all dark side users are Sith.
Exactly.
Not all people with red lightsabers are Sith.
Exactly. And I think people forget that a lot. And I think that this show, what is so important to me about this show is that we are finally getting to the High Republic, right? Like, we are finally getting to Sith lore. Like, and regardless of, like, even if you didn't like it, like, I think we should talk about, this show isn't perfect. It's got some flaws, right? Yeah. I think that, but what is important about it, and what to me is important about supporting it, other than the fact that I just actually enjoyed it, is that I want more shows like this. Yeah. This is the direction I want to see Star Wars go in. We've played the Skywalker saga is played out. That's a wrap. I don't want to see a Rey movie. I love Rey. I don't want to see one. I really don't. Nope. I'm not interested. Okay. This is what I'm more interested in seeing.
I'll tell you, I'm not either. I'm done with the very special hero goes and saves the galaxy.
Yeah.
Thing, right? George Lucas said this in an interview a very long time ago. And it's unfortunate that his movies went the way they did, because he did very much base the Rebel Alliance and the Empire on the conflict in Vietnam that was going on during the time these movies came out.
Right.
And the rebels were not American soldiers. Right. Right. Exactly. So the Empire very much was American. And he said this explicitly. This isn't like something he hid or tried to play around. He says this explicitly in an interview that the Empire is the American soldiers, right? Yeah. And the rebels are the Viet Cong fighting back against them, right? Mm-hmm. They're engaging in guerrilla warfare, and they're engaging in asymmetrical warfare because they're trying to protect what's left of their homeland. Mm-hmm. From an empire that wants to take it from them. And it's a shame that Star Wars played out the way it did, because that, to me, sounds like the much more interesting movie. I love war movies, and so I want to see that movie.
And I think, I mean, George Lucas also says explicitly, and also Freddie Prinze Jr. reiterates this in that rant he went on, but that Star Wars is for kids at the end of the day. The problem is like a lot of these things that, and I think that is also a lot of the problem that, you know, you see. We could talk about more about, I think there are several layers driving some of these weird reactions to this show, but I think definitely one of them that has been consistent with Star Wars fans across the ages at this point, right? Like, this is true of the prequels, this is true of the sequels, this is true of the Acolyte. It's that these movies are intended for kids, and so they're shaped in a very, you know, basic kind of way, and the ways that would be more exciting and sophisticated to us as adults, it's not geared towards us, and so they're not there. And I think that is frustrating for sure, but we have to keep in mind it's for kids. Like, that's why. Like, this was never a time in Star Wars history where this was intended for adults, right? Yeah. Like, except for maybe with some of these shows, but it's like, it's still it's Disney, so it's still intended for kids. Like,
oh yeah. Well, that's another thing. That's another crazy thing to me, is that people seem to not recognize that that a lot of this is for kids,
right?
And that the reason that they're upset by this is this comes up a lot with gatekeepers, right?
Yeah.
And one of the worst things I've dealt with in a different fandom, the 40K fandom, is people want to gatekeep that so badly. And it's because they grew up with it, so they have this idea that this is for them and them exclusively. Right?
Right.
And so as they grow up and become adults, they're like, well, this thing is still for me.
Right.
And then the creator of that property comes out and says, well, it's not for you, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they just kind of ignore that. They kind of throw that out the window. No, it's still for me. So I have to be the one who gets to dictate how this IP is going forward.
Right. And even so crazy to me is that even the creator will say, and this is exactly what happened with the prequels. The creator will come out and say, like, no, this is actually not for you. This is for kids. Y'all are grown now. So not for you. And then and what's crazy is, like, they will ignore that, still complain, be extremely toxic about it, and then still deify the creator. Oh, yeah. How can you put this man on a pedestal when you won't even listen to the words coming out of his mouth? He said it's not for y'all, and y'all don't care. You're like, George Lucas would be ashamed. This man is alive, and he don't care.
Yeah, he's alive. George, the thing that they don't seem to understand, George Lucas is sitting on a fat stack of billions of dollars right now. Exactly. He does not give a shit about anything anymore.
Exactly. And the other thing is, George Lucas is not George R.R. Martin. Okay. Yes. George R.R. Martin sat down. He is very picky about his work. He sat down, wrote a very intricate, you know, world building. This man went back and wrote, like, the whole reason House of the Dragon exists is because he went back and wrote, not a prequel, mind you. He didn't write a prequel. He wrote a fucking textbook. He wrote a textbook about, like, 500 years of history, hundreds of years before his story, just because he wanted to get the world building that intricate. Okay, George Lucas isn't like that. He was winging it. Okay, so that does leave, like, I don't know why people act like there's this body of canon for Star Wars that is like the Bible. Like, that doesn't really exist. There are a lot of canonical principles and a lot of vague canonic, you know, events going through history, right? But, like, they're not as strict. They're not. This isn't Game of Thrones. Like, they're not that strict. This isn't Lord of the Rings either. You know, that also has that sort of level of.
Yeah, well, that's the crazy thing is so unlike properties like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, right, where they had their lore built, that lore is baked into the IP, right, because the author chose to do all that world building inside of it, right?
Right.
A lot of the world building, a lot of the things that we accept as canon now for Star Wars came after the fact. Right?
Exactly.
George Lucas didn't come up with kyber crystals or lightsaber forms or how blasters work or, you know, what stormtrooper armor does when it's hit by a blaster, which is why every stormtrooper dies in one shot. You know, or, you know, how lightsabers are supposed to interact with certain materials or what cortosis is or what frick is. He didn't come up with any of that. Everybody else came up with that shit.
Exactly. So right? There's a bunch of authors working together to create new canon. Okay, so I don't understand why everybody's being so strict about this.
Yeah.
If
Well,
you've got multiple authors, there's gonna be some overlap, and there's gonna be some new things that make side things redundant, irrelevant anymore,
yeah.
right? Like that's what's gonna happen. You've got many hands in the pie here. Like there's no one source,
Oh yeah.
you know. And then to be said that's just first and foremost. But what's crazy is that the Acolyte doesn't even really change that much or
No, it
anything. To
doesn't.
my knowledge, like
It doesn't
that's what's so
change
crazy about
much.
it.
And what it really does is reintroduce things, right?
Yes.
And so the reason I mentioned cortosis specifically in that last statement is
Right.
because that is something now that comes up in the shows that was decanonized because Disney did away with the entire EU that is now being
Yeah.
recanonized, right?
Right.
And
Right.
fans should celebrate that kind of thing. They should
Exactly.
be elated because I
Yeah.
was. I fucking
Right.
love when I first before he even said cortosis, I knew what it was because I know what cortosis does to lightsabers because I'm that big of a fucking Star Wars nerd, right? So,
Right.
but then for fans to complain about it is like, how am I the one who's correct here, right?
Right.
Like, how am I a bigger Star Wars nerd than you, and you get to make YouTube videos for a fucking living about it, right?
I know.
Like,
I think the people who are true Star Wars nerds and have been making videos, like they are the ones who sort of at the very least appreciate that aspect of this show, you know.
yes,
And so I think this has really shown who are actually fans of Star Wars and Star Wars lore and are interested at the very least, like me. Like I wouldn't say I'm an expert necessarily, and it, by any means actually, because and we'll get back to that in a second. But the thing is that I'm more interested. I am interested in learning more of the lore, which is introduces. So the what to me part of that is, hey, I don't recognize this. Google is fucking free, my guy. So it's like
yeah,
you can see, just do a Google search. There's Wikipedia. You can see this shit. It's canon. Like they have sources
there's,
for you. They have all of the sources for you. Multiple works. You know, like force teleportation. I
yeah,
had to look that up. I wasn't familiar with that. Had plenty of sources, lots of sources. Bleeding a kyber crystal, right? Like how that process goes, how fast it's supposed to go, what it's supposed to look like. Lots of sources, lots and lots and lots of them. There's bibliographies for you to pursue. So when you say that this shit breaks canon, like it's the laziest argument when a quick Google search can disprove that. You
no,
know?
it definitely is. There's a long running Star Wars wiki called Wikipedia that
Right.
has all this info on it, and this is how I learned a lot of things about Star Wars that just didn't make sense to me. I love science fiction and fantasy because my brain always goes to, well, how does it work, right?
Exactly.
I like machines. So, my fascination with machines takes me to how does a lightsaber work? And then, oh, here's a link about kyber crystals, which are very important to lightsabers. Okay, how do kyber crystals work? Oh, well, wait,
Right.
I'm hearing that Sith use synthetic kyber crystals. Okay, how are they made? Oh, but wait, I'm reading about synthetic kyber crystals, and then I'm hearing some of the Sith kyber crystals are actually natural kyber crystals that they bled. How does the bleeding effect work, right? And
Yeah.
you can go down that rabbit hole an infinite number of times and land at all of those answers. And like you said, Google
Exactly.
is free, right?
Exactly.
And so
And
for
that's what
people,
yeah, that's what. Sorry, I don't know if I said this. I was saying this really
Mhm.
fast, but yes, Wikipedia. Like, there's no fandom I'm in that I'm not in that fucking wiki. Let me tell you what.
Yes.
Okay, there's not a single one. Okay, fire and ice. All right, like the one wiki to rule them all. Wikipedia,
Yeah.
all of them. I'm in them. Like, even for like random Chinese danbei, I'm in that Wikipedia. Okay, so like, I don't understand how people are, because one of the beautiful things about these wikis that people create, again, they list the sources at the end of the article. So if you don't believe, if you're saying that like what they're saying is not right, or is like, is based in an opinion and not, not fully representing, they go read the sources.
Yeah.
Go consume the sources. Like they're right there for you.
We know. I mean, anyone who's been in a college writing class knows that trick. Never quote the wiki directly. Go and grab
Exactly.
the sources for your bibliography.
Exactly. So that's the thing. Is like, yes. Anyway, that'd be a whole
Yes. But
side.
so,
But yes, I don't think people do know that, and I don't think people do that is the problem.
oh yeah,
They just want
absolutely.
to air their an unformed opinion on
Oh
the internet.
yes. Well, there's the other thing here is, and this crept up on me recently, was this idea of morality in Star Wars and what these so-called fans think it's supposed to be, right? And it takes me
Yes.
back to a Star Wars to a George Lucas quote, actually, when he was talking to Samuel L. Jackson about the whole purple lightsaber thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this was on the set of one of the prequel movies. And I'm sure people are familiar with the story, right? Samuel L. Jackson wanted a purple lightsaber because he wanted to stand out in the big scene on Genosha in the arena.
Right.
But there's a little sort of cutesy clip between those two just discussing this on set, and George Lucas had said to Samuel L. Jackson, well, good guys are green and blue and bad guys are red. That's just the way it is, right? And Samuel L. Jackson just replies with, well, what about purple? And George Lucas goes, oh, there could be a purple lightsaber. And that to me just does away with the whole morality argument right there. Because, again, what we're talking about is something that was written about after it was shown on screen, is the reason that Mace Windu has a purple lightsaber in the first place. Right?
Right.
Extremely powerful Jedi Master, but his lightsaber form requires him to play with the dark side a lot.
Right. Right.
And then, so his lightsaber color is a representation between that mixing of light and dark, and this goes all the way back to Revan with purple lightsabers.
Right.
So, but then beyond that, it is this idea that, and here, I'll just read this because this is the most ridiculous comment I got as a reply on YouTube to something I wrote. This guy just says, if you're trying to defend the show, you were terrible at it, just stop. Lightsabers use that color for a reason. Yes, that's perfectly fine. There's a theory of color, just so you know, and guess what? It's also natural. There's a reason why we are more scared of red than green. It has a deep anthropological meaning, and exploiting that for the storytelling is the opposite of hackery. And I'm like, bro. My guy, like, what are you talking about? First of all, stop acting like you understand color theory or anthropology.
No,
you don't.
First of all, no.
You don't, because I can bring up to you a million different reasons why the color red was used all throughout Catholicism, from the 10th century up to the 16th century.
And let's not act like this is some kind of like cultural, all humans did this. Like, red has had different meanings in different cultures.
No. This is dude bro Evo psych shit is what he's pulling.
Yeah. And the only reason that people are into the color blue, that humans have been into the color blue as a representative of, whatever this broad category of good things, is because we saw it so late that people were fascinated by it. It was one of the last colors that human eyes were capable of perceiving. So we were just obsessed with it, and we're like, this has to be, and then the sky's blue, the water is often blue. So it's stupid.
It was also one of like the rarest pigments we could find on the planet. So
exactly.
But then beyond that, it's like, first of all, I'll just say this: if blue is your favorite color, go outside. Go outside. Like,
you like blue.
No, you can like blue, but like, hey. I'm asking you to expand your palette a little bit here. Exactly. I'm sorry, I just run into that too frequently. You ask somebody what their favorite color is, and 99% of the time, it's fucking blue.
Right.
But beyond that is this discussion of morality, and people really, really don't like the way Acolyte plays with that morality. And we touched on this before about, one of the biggest strengths of the show is it shows the Jedi are not these perfectly good people, right?
Yes. That
they're making decisions in the context of the situations that they're put in, and they believe they are correct, right?
Right.
Indara believes it is correct that she has a right to teach Anastaea's children, right? Or to at least test them to see if they're force sensitive, right?
Right.
Anastaea and her partner believe it is right to keep the Jedi out, to keep their secrets safe, right?
Yeah.
And
Mother Coral especially believes that that it is right to violently and forcefully, keep her daughter from following what she wants to do and going with the Jedi.
Well, that's because what Mother Coral views is what Mother Coral is doing. She thinks it is self-defense, right?
Yes.
She is doing that kind of thing that we talk about a lot in certain political spaces, where the preemptive violence is defense of a community, right?
Right. And the thing is, what's so interesting is that everybody is taking all these actions in the best interest, what they see as the best interest of Osha and May.
Yeah.
And I feel like that actually sort of gets into that scene I actually wanted to talk
Hmm.
about, but I want to talk about it in a different context, so we'll talk about it later. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's what's so brilliant about it, because it's like, and I also think this ties into this idea. I think that there's this very light but important, similarity with a critique of policing, right? And a
Hmm.
critiquing of power and authority, right? In the sense that, there's nobody to keep these people from doing what they think is wrong. It's like the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right?
Yeah.
They're not they're not corrupt. They're not, deliberately taking advantage of their power, but
Hmm.
they have the power to throw their weight around in the defense of their misinterpretation of reality, but that they think is right
Yeah.
and just and in the benefit of the innocent, right?
Well, we see that in the sort of what becomes the C plot of the show, which is this idea that there is a senator who is
Yeah,
jockeying to put the Jedi Order under external review by the Galactic Senate, and
exactly.
this fight by Vernestra to keep that from happening.
Exactly.
Um,
And
and
and the thing the closest to corruption we see is Venestra,
yeah,
who seems to, and this is why we need a season two to explain a little bit more, but it seems like she's so interested in resisting that because there are skeletons in her closet specifically
oh
that
yeah,
she has done. And she wasn't even seemingly aware of what Soul and Dara and them did
yeah.
on,
Well, she
Brendock.
she
So,
wasn't aware of that. She wasn't aware that Kamir was alive.
right.
Um, and the crazy thing about what the big skeleton in her closet is Kamir, right?
Exactly. Right.
Is think about the implications this has for the galaxy if you're a citizen within the Star Wars universe, right?
Right.
Is first of all, it's the acknowledgement that the Sith are back, right?
Yeah.
So you're already like shitting your pants at that point. The second thing here is, wait a second, a Jedi can train someone who becomes a Sith. Now
Yes.
all trust in the entire Jedi Order is gone,
Right.
right? They are done. The Galactic Senate marches in there with soldiers and shuts them down that day.
Right.
Right? You get
Right.
Order 66 really fucking early. um, so it's that whole thing. And that's what people that is just a part of media literacy that people are missing is put yourself in universe. Understand what the events that are happening in that plot, in that world, mean for that world, right?
Right.
This started for me with an anime called Gate, which I still love to this day. I watch it frequently because it's
Hmm.
so hilarious. But it's a short isekai. It's a short reverse isekai, I should say, about an empire opening a magical gate into modern day Japan, and the Japanese Defense Force absolutely wrecking shop because they have guns,
Yeah.
um, and then
Right.
going and invading that world and taking over large swaths of it and changing their politics and everything. Um,
Mm.
and it reminded me of that because it's like this is if you put yourself in that world, you then understand why the Empire behaves the way it does, why the JSDF behaves the way it does, right? And it's not just all played for laughs at that point.
Right.
You get the idea. It's still very much a schlocky semi-harem anime, but
Hmm.
that's anime.
Yeah.
um, but this idea that going back to the whole morality thing, this idea that Jedi are inherently good, Sith are inherently bad, they should just fight each other and be done with it, um, is just fucking boring to me, honestly.
It is. And it's super boring and it doesn't make any sense. Like that is
Yeah,
just not it's not how morality works. It's not how human nature works, you know? And the thing is like I loved how this show explored that you can think you're not corrupt, right? You're not like and bad or like you're not being selfish, you're actually being quite selfless, but you could still make mistakes in the pursuit of that selflessness, right?
yeah,
And that those mistakes have consequences that are understandable and reasonable, right?
hmm,
Like I love that. I love that this transformation of the story of what happened, of this following the scenes, like what happened to her. And I understand, like, yes, I think the flashback episodes were, I don't like flashbacks in general. I hate flashbacks,
yeah,
actually. I think they're lazy writing. But that being said, I think they were important. And I think it is important that you had two of them bracketing either side, either half of the story, because it is symbolic of how the story shifts following what happened to her family,
yeah,
but from one understanding to another, right?
exactly.
And I think that that is a very good
And
good bookends to
yes.
demonstrate that shift in Osha,
Well,
and so I think it's interesting that if you follow the theme of the show being about a Jedi killer out of revenge, right? May
mm-hmm.
starts as the Jedi killer, but the true Jedi killer in the end ends up being Osha,
Yeah.
right? And I think that it's important because it's also like with May, it's like she seems so erratic and unlikable and hard to like support her, but
Mm-hmm.
Osha, it's like you really
Yeah.
got it. Like it was sad, but you got it, right?
Yeah.
And I think showing that is important because I think even with Anakin, his fall to the dark side seemed. I mean, honestly, I didn't really blame him so much as I blamed the Jedi, but I think that like come on, bro, like you're telling me that you have to resist emotion and attachment so much that this man would rather fall to the dark side to protect his wife and child. That don't even make sense. Like, let's
Yeah.
think this through. Like, I mean, it makes sense, but it's just so fucking idiotic that
But
like I could never
that's
respect the Jedi after that ever again, in my opinion. But
yes.
that being said, that was a whole different kind of fall. I like that this show really did show both the seduction of the dark side, like the actual
Mm-hmm.
seduction of the dark side, but also the fact that you could turn to the dark side for really relatable reasons. Like I could not tell you that I would not have reacted that
Yeah.
same way.
And
Even when I looked at Anakin, I was like, bro, I feel like I would have done that differently.
yeah.
Because I just feel like I would have left the Jedi. I don't understand why you didn't do that. But anyway, so
Yeah.
looking at Anakin's fall wasn't as relatable at looking at Osha's fall, in my opinion.
Well, I can understand OSHA's fall being relatable, but it's relatable especially to these. I'll just say it, men who
Yeah,
claim to be Star Wars fans should be
right,
Revan's fall to the dark side because,
right,
or rather, his freaking like switch back and forth,
right,
um,
right,
because the entire reason Revan falls to the dark side is because he believes he is doing the right thing.
right,
And for people to laud Revan for this, but then drag OSHA for it is wild. Like that is
right,
so far out of left field. Um,
right.
and here's a comment I really wanted to talk about because this ties into the whole morality thing.
Like
This
doing the
guy,
right thing. I don't think she cared about that. It's almost like, but like it's like you're telling me that you wouldn't turn to the dark side to kill someone who murdered your mother.
yeah.
Don't lie to me unless you really hate your mom. I don't want to hear that. Like,
Well, that's the thing,
if you
and that's
love
the
your
thing
mother,
is people will say that all the time, right? Is like if you put hands on my mama, it's like it's
exactly.
that. Like OSHA is doing that.
And he lied about it to her face. That's gotta
Yes.
fucking hurt. Ain't no
Not
fucking way, bro.
not only
He lied
lied
to her
about it
face
to
for
her.
years
Here's the
and
crazy thing.
blamed it on her sister.
Not only lied about to her, blamed it on her sister, sacrificed her sister as far as Soul was aware until May showed back up, right?
Right,
As
right,
far as Soul was aware, he let a child die to favor another one,
right,
right?
right,
That's just downright fucking evil. There's no other way to put
right,
that, right?
right,
Then lies about it, not just lies about it to her, lies about it to her for 16 goddamn years,
right.
right? And
And all of this was, I mean, all of this was because he just like looked at her and they were vibing.
yeah, that's really it. Is Soul was
Oh, bro. I
Soul
wanted to
is
start
that
doing
guy
that.
you meet at a music festival who tells you he vibes with you really hard.
Right.
Um,
And then just ruins your whole life
yeah.
because of it.
No, he tells you he vibes with you really hard, but then like you go back to your tent and he's kind of just awkwardly following you there.
Literally. And then murders your mom.
So you know,
What the
but Soul was definitely in the wrong for that. I love Soul as a character, but that
I
that
do.
that boy ain't right.
Yeah. That was wrong at every level. And I think that's what people were disappointed in. But
Mhm.
I like I said, I think that's important. Like it's not like he wasn't being creepy about it or weird
Yeah.
about it. Like he literally believed he would scare. Yes, okay. So let's talk about what I want to talk about
Mhm.
then.
Yeah,
He was
absolutely.
legitimately scared, not just for Osha, but for May. And I
Mhm.
think people, for some reason, missed that. I know, like, my dad missed that. And so I was a little shocked, surprised about that. And I think what they missed in particular, and he isn't the only person, like, I see this in, like, comments in this group I'm in. It's like, when Anastasia was started to force teleport, when she was like, she was going down, her daughter's right there, she starts to teleport, right? And everybody was so surprised. They're like, I don't understand why Soul killed her in that moment. And I was like, because you're not looking at May. He looks at Anastasia. He looks at May. Anastasia is disappearing into this smoke form, but so is May.
Mm-hmm.
May's form is disintegrating. There are wisps of smoke, and I went back to check just to make sure I wasn't fucking crazy. But no, there are wisps of like smoke coming off of her, and he looks at May, and then he kills Anastasia, and it's because, and it goes back to when May says, you know, when she misspeaks as children do, or maybe she didn't. I don't know what. Honestly, I would love some more information about what they were, how, not even the how they created those girls, but the why.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like some more information about something that I also like to touch on a little bit, but about the fact that they split them in two, which I thought stood out a lot more to me than I think it did to other people. But yes, but back to the scene, it's like she says that what did she say exactly? That that you have to like walk through fear to become something new, and that like you have to like die to become something that really set off the red flags in his head, right?
The word that was used was sacrifice. That is the word that got everybody's ears to perk up. Exactly. And so, you know, you could see the alarm bells ringing in this man's head. He's like, they're about to kill these little girls. So when he sees Anastasia practicing this very rare form of power, I'm not even sure he understood really quite what it was. But most importantly, it wasn't just that she was doing this weird thing. It was that there was in Congress something weird happening with May. He thought he was saving May's life. Yeah. You know? And that to me was very obvious, but so many people missed that. And I was really, really shocked about that. Right. But I will be fair. I think that what sucks about having so much of this really weird hate and these really weird comments, which I'll share some of the weirdest tweets I saw later, is that some of the legitimate critique gets a little drowned out. And like, I'm not even saying that I agree with all of the critique, but I do think that there are some legitimate critiques that deserve at least discussion. And I think one of them is the writing. I don't think the writing was great. I don't think it's totally her fault. I think that the length of the episodes was way too short, and I think the length of the show was too short. Yeah. I think that part of the reason, I just can't keep blaming all of these misunderstandings on media literacy, although a lot of them are due to lack of media literacy, don't get me wrong, but I think it's media literacy combined with the way the show is written to not emphasize certain important points the way that they should have been emphasized. Yeah. That is causing some of these misunderstandings, you know, like, and to come back around to a point that I want to come back to is like, for example, the idea of them splitting one entity into these two girls, right? That to me is super important because it kind of put some of, you know, the criticisms also of Amanda's performance as May and Osha as like wooden, and like their reactions were like a little muted and delayed in some respects. But I was like, honestly, all of that made a lot of sense with that piece of information, because I was like, this isn't Luke and Leia, right? These aren't two independent people. These are two half people walking around independently. Okay. It's like a half a soul, right? Yeah. Like, and I love that their fight really seemed to drive that home. And the fact that they were doing all of the same movements in mirror of each other. You know, they are one person, and together they make up one whole, you know, individual with understandable reactions. But apart, they're just two half people walking around, you know? Yeah, it's also just crazy to me because I recognize something in those two characters, especially watching them as children. Right. That I recognize in myself, and that is, it's a weird thing. The thing is I'll have to push back on the media literacy point a little bit, because what you demonstrated in your last statement is your ability to read between the lines and connect events together, right? Right. And people who are criticizing the show for not spelling out why Soul killed Anastasia.
There's definitely a balance. Sure. Yeah.
I mean,
there's other shows where they've done the same thing, and I'm like, but they really did make it very obvious, and you're just not picking up what they're putting down. Like,
people just don't dive deeper and try to read between those lines.
Right.
Beyond that, though, what I'm recognizing in May and Osha, especially as children, is when it was when May got super, like, almost infuriated at OSHA and kept screaming,
Yeah.
like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you, right?
Yes.
I realized for a second there, I got some neurodivergent representation. I was
Right.
watching a child have an autistic meltdown because she
Yeah.
did not understand someone who was acting in a very neurotypical way.
And the thing is that I feel like it's almost like, when part of you betrays you,
Yeah.
it was like that, right?
Yes.
Like
And it's a lot
it
of that too, is
she really thought
we
that they were to them they were the same person. She couldn't fathom that the other half of her
yeah,
wouldn't be on the same page,
exactly. She could not fathom that this other part of her would not make the same decision.
Right. Right.
And to an extent, OSHA could not fathom the same thing, but OSHA
Yeah.
takes that other part of the neurodivergent spectrum and instead of lashing out, goes into
Internalize
shutdown.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
And it isn't till they really come to a head that they begin to recognize that in each other and say,
Right.
it goes from you're autistic, no, you're autistic to we're autistic.
Right. Right.
So, it is that weird thing, and maybe that's just my personal reading on it. I'll admit I have the
No, I mean,
bias, but
I think that's absolutely fair. And I think so. What I will say though is one more. I think a criticism that uh that what's his face made Filmento that I actually did agree with 80% of agreed with is the idea that the relationships were shallow. And I think it's just that is also another failure that I consider of the writing. Like, and I think I like I said, I really do. I don't consider it of a failure of the writing intrinsically. And I will also come back to say, let's not act like Star Wars isn't full of fucking bad writing. Like, be fucking for real. Right? That is, in fact, that is almost like a hallmark of the franchise at this point. It's that consistent. So I don't know why people are like, this is so much worse than any other, work of live action Star Wars. They're all written badly. Let's be fucking for real. Yes. But I will say that like the relationships it was just like they were sort of, you were told that they were there and they weren't really shown to be there, and that really felt like a timing thing. Just because they had so many other things to get to, they couldn't slow down and show some of the build and of those relationships. But like there's like there's other, I think, ways that they could have demonstrated some of like the intimacy or hinted at it. I don't really blame it on the acting so much, although I think maybe that was a part of it. But I think Soul did a really good job at illustrating his relationship to OSHA. It just doesn't make any, it's not that it doesn't make any sense, it just you don't really get the story of it, or you
well, again, it's
just like, why are you so attached to this girl that you just met? I really never let that attachment go. Like, it's actually, I mean, the more I think about it, it is actually a little weird.
I mean, a lot of it comes down. A lot of it really comes down to a failure of production. Star Wars loves creating marketable characters, things that they can sell toys of, basically. So people like Cord, for example, is a marketable character. They want to sell toys of Cord. But Cord, unfortunately, dies. But the thing to understand is, again, this is about being able to read between those lines and understand that even though these characters are short-lived, they are still characters that we know things about, right?
Yes.
And so we know that Cord is very proud of his promotion to Jedi Knight and takes his role very, very seriously, to the point he is dogmatic, to the point he's not even like, oh, I'm the good Jedi, but like I'm also the good lawman.
Sorry, do you mean Lord? The
Ward, yes. Sorry.
Yes. Sorry. Okay. Just making sure. Can we talk about Jackie, please?
Jackie is fucking adorable.
I fucking loved her. She was so badass.
She was adorable. She reminded me of like early Ahsoka, where it's just like this big, bright-eyed child who wants to make friends with everybody.
And she was talented. Like she was putting Kanye on the back foot at one point, like heavily. You know?
She was all about it. It's just Kamir is a force. And so it's like, sorry, there's no Padawan that's fighting that guy and sticking around and tell a tale.
But R.I.P. for real. I would have loved to see what she would have been like as a full-fledged Jedi Knight.
That is a criticism I can get with. Is it's sad that those characters were short-lived and that we didn't get to spend time with them. The other
Yeah.
criticism I can kind of vibe with is Basil. Um,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
this character did not need to exist. I'm sorry.
It's like, I'm not even. I understand. Like, it's sort of like BB-8, right? It's like they're there for the
Hmm.
cuteness, kid factor.
Yeah.
There is just. I will say that like there were a couple moments. Well, one major moment where his behavior was like a little incomprehensible. And like I think I can explain it. Like I could
Hmm.
read between the lines enough to kind of explain it. But I will say that it was enough for me to do a double take at the time, which is when he the way he reacted to Soul
Hmm.
with May on the ship, and I was especially because it showed him, attacking May. I'm like, I can get it, right? It's like attacking her and trying to kill her, two
Yeah.
different things. But um, but yeah, his motivations were a little
They
suspect.
were.
And then it was back to hunting her again, when the
Hmm.
Jedi came. So it's like, I guess, and like, yeah, I guess I can explain it, right? It's like, he would want her to come to justice
Hmm.
properly and not necessarily murdered, right? Or
Yeah.
like, so I do get that, but
I mean that I all
yeah,
understand. It's just like a lot of the events that involve Basil in the story could have happened without his presence.
for
That's the
sure,
thing.
for
Is
sure. To
like
me, I chalk that up to being a kid thing.
it is a
It's
kid
just like
thing. It's
like
just
a character you throw in, yeah,
it's very shoehorned in, and
yeah,
the unfortunate fact is because of that, Basil serves really no narrative purpose.
yeah,
He's there kind of as almost a MacGuffin for the
for
story.
sure, for sure.
But we run
I would have
across
liked
that.
to see more. Well, I would have just liked
Mhm.
to see more because this
Oh
is
yeah.
always going to be my wheelhouse. But I would have liked to see a little bit more why Osha was willing to trust Chimere in the end so much. Like,
Hmm.
it's because there's this idea. It's not like you just. I mean, yeah. I guess now talking it out, I can see it's like her one resistance to him. Well, there's two, right? I mean, yes, he
Yeah.
also killed her friends. So like, let's start there.
Yeah.
But it's also, yeah, I mean, she was always like, I won't turn to the dark side. And then she did. So maybe it's just like, now that this has happened,
Hmm.
I guess maybe you're the only person I can rely on. But I feel like a lot of that felt very rushed. So my biggest issue with the writing is probably pacing.
Yeah.
It wasn't really dialogue, although that could be a little clunky. But I thought like I said, if you remember that it's for kids, I think
Yeah.
that I could explain that away. But the
Well.
pacing really bothered me. I really felt like a lot of it felt rushed.
Oh yeah.
So I really would have liked to see it breathe more.
That
Um,
happens a lot with these shows. Is the
yeah,
pacing has to kind of move at a breakneck speed because they only have so
yeah,
much time within to tell a story.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
and I'll just be look. I'm not a woman allegedly, um, but the whole like holding hands with Kamir scene is there for the ladies. I'm just putting
Yeah,
it that
yeah.
way.
Oh, the thing I know, okay, first of all, there are a lot of things I want for the ladies. I love it. First of all, ain't no reason for your arms to be out like that. I mean,
I'm sorry. When
and then
I
in the pool, and then I was like, okay, maybe they're just playing with us. Maybe they're playing with us. But when he got out of the pool, he's like, if you're not gonna join me, I'd like to put my clothes on. I was like, join you.
yeah,
You invite people to join you now? Okay.
that to me
But
was that to me also like I say it's for the ladies and I say I'm not a woman allegedly for a reason here. My therapist is acquainted with the lesbian within.
yes,
Um,
yes.
but the that scene to me it alludes back to things Kamir said earlier, which is I don't think Kamir really views himself as Sith. What he
Yes.
views
Mhm.
himself as is a person indulging in the dark side because what people tend to forgive about the dark side is not about being evil, right?
Right.
It's about giving in to your passions. It's about
Yeah.
enjoying your life without apology.
Right.
And sometimes, unfortunately, that means taking lives of other people if you're a sadist. But
Right.
um, no, it's about enjoying your life without restriction. And so that scene is very much, yes, it's about sex, right? Is.
And I think it's super interesting because I also think that
Mhm.
you could argue that the Sith are of all of the dark emotions that Chimere lists, right? That are considered part of the dark side. The thing is that a lot of Sith are defined by one or two,
Yeah,
right? Hatred, anger, vengeance. But his seems to really be desire. He
yeah,
wants a partner. He wants an acolyte. He wants to, be with somebody.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that, I think, was an interesting representation because, yes, so often that we focus on the dark emotions, other dark passions, right, that
Mm-hmm.
are highlighted by violence, but those aren't the only ones part of the dark side. And so I
Yeah.
feel like his defining one really is desire.
All I know is they put Khmer on the Marvel plan because that head does
Yeah.
not fit on that body.
Yeah. He played the shit out of that. He and Soul really were truly exceptional performances.
I'm sorry. I
I would
wish
say.
I wish I saw just more of him with the cloak off because it looked like
Yeah,
someone stuck like one figure's
yeah,
head on another figure's body for most of
I
that.
know. I know. But I think I thought it was really funny his, his transition from that funny goofy character, to
Yeah.
his, I guess, his like real personality or whatever. That was
Hmm.
great.
Oh, it was
And
amazing.
Soul really did impress me because also the other thing you have to remember is that Lee Jung Jae doesn't speak English.
Yeah.
So he's reciting those lines, and the emotion that he's putting into them truly was very, very good. I really don't like to hear the criticisms of Amanda, but
Hmm.
I think it's also that a lot of her scenes were with Soul and Chimere, and their performances were so exceptional
Yeah.
that I could see the difference at least in their performances. But I don't think she did it badly. And like I said, again, a lot of that was explained to me by some of the revelation behind like the girl's existence.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, like Osha was very low key, But
Yeah.
I also the other thing is that like I remember thinking at one point I was like, is it really a problem though for a character to be reserved? Like we're so
It's
used to these characters that are emotive and eccentric and live their feelings out loud all the time,
yeah.
and she's just not that. That's not her,
Well,
you know.
it's crazy to me that that criticism even comes because what people were complaining about when the sequel trilogy was released was the Disneyfication or Marvelization of Star Wars, where all the characters were goofy jokesters all the time. And then you have a character
Right.
who's not, and then people are like, oh, well, that character's wooden and that character's boring. And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
which one do you fucking want?
What? No,
Like,
they're never happy. They're just never happy.
and so it's like, I don't care. Han Solo was the wisecracks guy. Like,
Right.
that was his
Right.
thing. Luke was the whiny teenager who eventually learned to crack wise with Han Solo. So,
Right. Right.
like, that was just
Yeah.
their thing. And so you get these characters and compare it to someone like Ray. Ray was just a fucking rage monster.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And yeah,
like,
I did like how reserved Oprah was. Like and you could really tell that she was fighting for it at times and lost that battle at times, right?
yeah,
Like I think you saw that with, her sister, but you saw that especially with, Chimere when she kind of breaks and
yeah.
holds the lightsaber to his neck. So I feel like, you know,
And it ties in. It just ties overall into the narrative itself, right? Which
right.
is that Osha is trying to suppress these emotions,
Exactly.
right? She
And
is,
she does, and that's what, yeah. The more I think about it, she really was right in killing Soul. I'm not gonna lie. I love Soul, so it was a little painful to watch. I actually thought she was gonna ease up on him after a while, so I was a little surprised when she took it all the way to the end. But that being said, if you really think about it, like not only did he lie to her face, he also made her feel like they made her feel bad for
mhm,
not getting over her family's death. Like y'all
yeah,
murdered them, and now you're like, get over it, suck it up. Okay, well you can't,
yeah.
so now we gotta kick you out. Like
Not only are
that's
we gonna lie to you about it, then we're gonna tell you that you need to completely abandon everything you feel about that moment.
right, right. That's fucked up. Yeah, that was well deserved, and not just that, but now she's stuck in the world with like useless skills.
Hmm.
Now she's got to work a job where that is really dangerous. She's got nobody, no
Yeah,
friends, no close, no family, no lovers, no nothing. To the point that when her sister does start going around murdering people, she's got no alibis because she's
yeah,
close to nobody. They really ruined her life, like
yeah.
bad.
They fucked it up pretty bad, and that was another crazy criticism that came just out of left field for me was this idea that where Osha says, well, she's got like no marketable skills, no marketable Jedi skills, right?
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
like she doesn't, one, because again she's suppressing everything so deeply, like she's
right.
doing her best to not connect with the Force.
Yes,
um and two, the Jedi are the galactic cops. They're not just going to sit by and let someone who they know is force sensitive go out and use their skills to go be like a bounty hunter or something.
Exactly. That's the thing.
Like,
She could have used her skills if she wanted to, not and not gotten in trouble for it. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, and I think that's an interesting thing that I'd like to see explored. Is like, what are these people expected to do? That's actually a very good question. Because, well, I guess you see it. You see it some with Ahsoka as an adult. She walks away from the order.
I see a lot of it. And
but it's like, what do you do when these people walk away from the order with training, right?
Yes. I just saw a picture of Manny Jacinto like outside of Acolyte, and never mind, that head fits on that body.
Yeah.
That man is square.
I think that. I mean, it was a great performance because, like, I love how he starts out in his familiar goofy role that he normally kind of does, that you at least see in The Good Place, right? And then segues into this more serious role that he never really gets a chance to play. Yeah. And so I really think that he got to show his.
That was also the craziest thing is I actually did not remember he was in The Good Place before you said that, and I watched all of The Good Place inside of like 2 weeks. Good Place is one of my favorite shows of all time. I'm not a person who loves sitcoms. I love The Good Place.
Yeah.
But to realize that is, that's the goofy motherfucker from The Good Place.
Yeah.
No, he's great though. I mean, I love it. And I love seeing these actors who have been regulated as like B-list for a long time come up in these big IPs too.
Right. Right.
Amandla, for all the criticism that Amandla gets, I think she played Osha and May to a T.
Yes.
First of all, we know from
different in each role, right?
Yeah.
Like her body language was different. The way she held herself was different. Like May was very much like shoulders back, chest forward. Like Osha was very like chill, low key, like reserved to her. Like her body language was kind of to herself, kept to herself. Like I think it was great.
Oh yeah. And even in the early fight scenes, the way that May fights is like, this is someone who takes themselves way too fucking seriously and has not touched grass for a very long time. Like, this is someone who's doing ninja cosplay is what this is.
Right.
So it is, but no, she did great, and we know from actors in the past that playing twins by yourself is a difficult thing to do. I mean, Tom Hardy has done this, right?
Right.
Fucking Leonardo did it at one point. Leonardo DiCaprio did it at one point. And so playing two separate people who are also you is a very difficult thing. And in this case, it's two separate people in canon who are also you in canon. So
I'm actually interested. I was wondering if at some point they would rejoin them somehow, which would be interesting to see. But I almost wonder if they wouldn't, because rejoin, I think they would be too powerful to make sense.
Well, they would be too powerful to make sense, but also the rejoining thing is, to me, it's kind of that writing yourself into a corner thing, where the only thing you can do now is scale to that, versus keeping them separate and letting them be individual characters means that now we have, in the case of May, now we have an unknown quantity, someone who kind of remembers their past.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And now, now we are actually interesting. I would love to see a season 2, because there's so many interesting things and questions now, because now we get to see them fully switch places, right? Yes. Then, like May being at least Jedi adjacent, and Osha being, a dark acolyte. How much May now pours her energy. We've never seen a May outside of revenge, right? So how much does May pour her, energies and support into the Jedi without her memory? Will they then be forced to fight again? But just, in a mirrored...
Also, who does May become without the trauma? That's the thing, right?
Exactly. And we haven't seen that with her, right? Like, even with Osha, at least we got some extent. I mean, like I said, I think it was a very muted and not a good example of who she truly was. So I'd be interested to see what Osha's character is like with Chimera as well. But who do we get to see? Who is May outside of her revenge, right?
Oh yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to see. I'm hoping just as much as you are that this is going to get greenlit for a season 2, despite the criticism. Because here, what I want to move into next is really the way the criticism went.
Yes.
because it's interesting. It's always interesting to me to look at something. Rotten Tomatoes is, let's just put it this way, it is the household name in media criticism now.
Yes.
Nothing gets by without having a Rotten Tomatoes score plastered on it at some point, to the point we dealt with a whole season of movies where the trailers could not mention the Rotten Tomatoes score.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but a 17% user score versus an 80% critic score. Now that's a big discrepancy, right?
Yeah.
That's a
And
lot of wiggle room.
what I wish I could find, someone did a compilation where they looked, or a chart.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this might be a view on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm not sure, but you could see the number of reviews,
Yeah.
and the number of reviews left for the Acolyte is more than all of the other Star Wars shows combined.
Yeah.
Like, it's truly a very obvious, and that really pissed me off when Filmento mentioned that,
Mm-hmm.
because I was like, it is such obvious review bombing,
Yeah.
you know, that
Yep.
it's really frustrating to even bring how low the reviews are into play. And
Right.
that's not to say that every review is disingenuous and review bombing, but come on, like, you can't have a true representation of what the show, of the reception of the show, when people were leaving dozens, if not hundreds, of reviews before of an episode before it even aired.
Yeah.
You know,
And
like,
it's weird to me that a content creator forgets that kind of thing, because one of the
yeah,
biggest things back in early YouTube was review bots. And like and dislike bots being, added to algorithms so they could go and review bomb people's videos and just dislike them in algorithm hell.
right.
And so it's weird for me that a content creator just like conveniently forgets like what it's like to go through that.
Yes. And I can't find the chart, but it does. I do see a
Yeah.
quote where it's like 25,000 reviews for the Acolyte. That's
Mhm.
more reviews than all 3 seasons of The Mandalorian. That's more reviews than Game of Thrones season 1. Okay?
Jesus.
It doesn't even make sense. You know?
No.
And the thing is like, all people have to do is like say, oh, it doesn't deserve it, or it does deserve it. But the reality is that is review bombing. That is not reflective of what people think. Personally, I mean, I would give it a 7.5,
Hmm.
but I would say anywhere between a 6 and an 8 is reasonable.
Yeah.
Anything below or above that is disingenuous, in my opinion.
I'd give it about a 7, and I've talked extensively in doing gaming podcasts with my friend Chris, who set this whole channel up with me. That we come from the Game Informer era of video game reviews, where
Right.
like average was 7 for some reason, even though it's on a scale of 10, where 5 should be the average score.
Mhm.
But 7 was like passable. Um, but no, I'd probably be in that same ballpark, a 7.5, maybe an 8 even.
Yes.
I think I lean more towards the 8 side, because I'll talk about this a little bit later, but all the things that this sets up, it implies for Star
Yeah,
Wars going
I agree.
forward.
I agree.
But I've copied and pasted some really, really hilarious takes, because what I did when I went to Rotten Tomatoes, first of all, I don't know why Rotten Tomatoes does this. It makes it extremely difficult to find the actual reviews people have left.
Yes, I noticed that because I wanted to see what people were saying, and I could not see it. Like,
Yeah. So I had to like go back and sort of reverse Google foo this to be like, okay, I want to see the actual reviews. Thank you. Um, and then when I got to the reviews, I kind of started scrolling down, because I'm like, wait a second, this has a 17% score, but I'm seeing 9 stars, I'm seeing 8 stars, I'm seeing 10s. Like, I'm seeing all these positive reviews of the Acolyte, and then when I finally
yes,
get down to the like 1 star and half-star reviews, I'm looking at reviews from like back in time at this point.
yes,
And so these are either very early reviews, or these are reviews before the show even aired. Right?
yes.
So that just contributes to the whole review bombing thing. It's not a theory at this point, it's a fact. The show was review bombed. And let's just put it on the table and air it out, right?
Right,
We know why it was review bombed.
right,
Right?
right.
And I don't give a shit as long as it keeps pissing off the right people. Make Star Wars blacker and gayer, please.
Exactly. The last video criticism to me is hilarious, because I'm like, it was so light. I had people that were like, were they even really lesbian? Like, I don't even know. I had to find like one picture of Anastasia like touching Kirill's Mother
touching her
Coral's
face.
to be like, no, I mean this was pretty obvious at this point. But otherwise, that was it. They didn't kiss, they didn't hold hands, nothing. They just had a kid together and one touched the other's face. That's it. And that bothers you that much? Like, please touch fucking grass.
I have urine brainworms now, so if like two women on screen get like within 10 feet of each other, it's just immediate shipping. So
I mean, I'm the same. I think it's hilarious the way people will go out of their fucking way to deny the least bit of homoerotic tension between two characters, and in this one, just the slightest glance, and they're like gay, like bro, like I think it is actually written to be gay, but it's just like it's just really crazy that that's what bothers you. And I see two straight characters, two quote unquote straight male characters do way worse, and y'all are totally fine with that. Like, it's kind of crazy.
I don't know, but I want to get into some of these reviews that we read. I did a quick browse and I just clipped some of the worst of them that I saw. I'm going to start with mild, and then we'll go to like the extra spicy ones.
Right.
So the first one was just a non-review, and this is something that I always hate, is when people leave bad scores on something, but then leave like a non-review response, which was, this person just commented, rotten show from a rotten company.
Right.
Like, what is that? What is a viewer supposed to glean from that, right?
Right.
What value does that offer? And this is just really showing me that there's a lack of moderation across Rotten Tomatoes. They don't care that this review exists. If it was my review site, this would be deleted, right?
Absolutely.
This would be a discarded review.
And that's I was about to say, is like Rotten Tomatoes, I used to, like, back in like 2016, 2019, I used to pay a lot of attention to Rotten Tomatoes, and I don't anymore because they don't do this. Like the review of a show. I mean, all of it is just it's the culture wars writ large. That's it. Unless it's just not popular enough to get enough culture war traction on the internet. Like
it very much is. So now we're kind of ramping up the heat just a little bit, just a tad here. To another review that says, my favorite part is when the actress tries to make different faces for each character she plays but fails miserably at it. He goes on to laugh. Love the YouTube reviews, though. Way better than the show itself. Now, I'm saying we're adding a little bit of spice here, but that statement honestly pissed me off more than anything else.
Yep.
And I'll tell you why. It's because ever since a certain YouTube channel, CinemaSins, came out, people flock to YouTube in droves before they watch a work.
Yeah.
And then take that review or that criticism as gospel.
Yes.
And so even if they do see the movie or the TV show later, or play the game later in some instances, they walk into it with a bias.
Yeah.
Right.
And the thing is, you can always see it because they're making the same complaints about things that aren't true. And so then when you deconstruct that criticism, they flail and then just double down because they didn't really come up with that idea. Like they didn't see evidence that led them to construct that complaint, right? They're parroting.
Yeah. Well, they're parroting to a ridiculous sense to the part that it's starting to harm works of art and artists.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'll just be perfectly honest. The Acolyte lost money. Like, it did not perform well financially. And it's because of things like this. Because people take that review bombing as gospel and they go, well, it's definitely not worth it.
But the thing is, the crazy thing to me is that then they're going to be like, they think that they're getting their way because they're like, okay, well, then they'll understand. They'll stop having these woke TV shows because they're going to get this kind of negative press. But the reality is that no, they just scale back everything.
Yeah. They scale back everything to the point that
they just make less of it.
This is the way that high level decisions at corporations go that these guys really don't understand. They're not going to change Star Wars into what you want it to be changed into. They will discard Star Wars.
Absolutely. And the thing is like I'm so frustrated with these people that at a certain level I'm almost glad that they're unhappy because they don't deserve Star Wars.
Oh,
you deserve to have their dreams crushed and ruined.
I am completely glad they are unhappy, and that's why I say what I say this about almost every IP I step into now is make it blacker and gayer because it pisses the right people off. I mean that from the bottom of my being.
And I hope they have nothing.
Like I do not care if the IP past that point like becomes financially viable or anything like that. All I care about is that you feel like you can no longer enjoy this thing because I do not want you to be a part of the community which enjoys it.
Yes.
Right? Yes. Is that because I know people who do enjoy it, who are part of that community, and they're great fucking people. You aren't a good person. Right. But
and you don't be in the same fandoms as me, to be fair.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But that's the thing is we know people in those fandoms who are just terrible fucking people. Like they just want to commiserate. And they don't enjoy anything about the thing that they claim to be fans of, to the point that you catch them in their lies, and like you said, then they start doubling down.
Yep.
Right? Start going, no, my criticism is valid because of XYZ, 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 and you'll follow them all the way down that rabbit hole and debunk everything they say, and then they just turn it into a fucking clown show. They just start sea lioning. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you get stuck at this point where now it's like, all right, this person is definitely doing nothing but trying to waste time.
Right.
Right? But moving on to the spicier takes here. I'm going to do the spiciest one, and I'm going to do just the most hilarious one, honestly. Okay. So the spiciest one that I just clipped, and mind you, this was like 4 reviews out of a sea of millions. I did not have time to scroll through all this garbage for my own mental and emotional health. But this person just wrote, absolute garbage. This is just identity politics masquerading as a TV show. I've heard that a million fucking times. I have grown increasingly disillusioned with the Star Wars franchise with every new movie or TV show that Disney has released since talking it over. I can now say I have no interest or care whatsoever about Star Wars now. I am done. Checked out. Do not care at all what happens now. Sad to say that I am no longer a Star Wars fan. This is This is saying something since I considered myself a pretty big fan growing up into my adult years. I really liked Rogue One and Andor, but everything else has gone progressively worse. I think I am done with Star Wars now for good unless they really change course. Since I don't see that happening, probably remain done with Star Wars. Not even angry, just done and uninterested because of how much it really sucks now.
Really? Because you sound pretty angry.
First of all, that's a lot of words to say I don't care.
You are.
That's a whole paragraph, G.
Like, right, like you're so sad. You're so upset. Yeah, and like I think Rogue One and Andor are probably the lightest of So
no, but that's the thing. What really ticked me off about this is when he says I liked Andor, right? And then people complain about morality and Acolyte. Our first introduction to Andor as a character is him murdering someone. Right. Let me make that clear.
And the thing is, like, what is insane here is that nothing about this is a critique about. So what I've noticed is there are different levels to these critiques. This is one of them.
Yeah.
No, 4. I'll say that's 4.
Mm-hmm.
The bottommost layer is the ones that are like this, that have nothing that are complaining chiefly about the fact that they're clearly like Black, Asian, and gay characters in this show, right? But also twisting Star Wars lore so badly that they're complaining about things that don't even fucking make sense. Yeah. Okay, like I saw a tweet where the guy was like, oh, you guys are hyping up Khmer so bad, but and someone was like, oh well, like you guys hype up Anakin all the time, like we hype up Darksiders, and he's like, yeah, but Anakin never killed a kid. that is the bottom tier level low. Like you're negative stupid at that point. Like the ignorance is just, you are really just making shit up to justify bullshit. Like be fucking for real right now.
You on the left end of that bell curve, aren't you, my guy?
Like that's the worst of the worst. The second tier up is a review like this, where not a single thing has to do with anything about the show, not the writing, not the acting, right? Like not the plot, not lore, nothing. You just don't like that there are Black, Asian, and gay people on your screen. That's it. Yeah. And then the next level up is people who are critical of the show, like the actual elements of the show, but like overly so. So like Filmento falls into that
Mm-hmm.
category for me,
Yeah.
you know. And then I would say that the most the it's not the most annoying, but it's people who are critical of the elements of the show, sort of seemingly willing to give it a shot, but it's like if you argue with them about it, they still seem to like be deliberately missing the point. It's like almost like they're getting it and then they like don't anymore. And
Absolutely.
and Fomento almost also falls into that category, but because it's like you're acting as if you are being fair and unbiased, but you're not because you're so deliberately being obtuse
Mm-hmm.
that it's clearly disingenuous, you know?
Yeah. It, it comes in a way where it's unfortunate that a work like this is not being seen by people who I know would enjoy it because they've bought this lie about it.
Yeah.
Um, it's sad to see that with any piece of work. I've seen it with several pieces of work, and it's. I'll admit that I've fallen victim to this in the past.
Hmm.
Like there's so many great pieces of media that I have not consumed because of this kind of attitude towards it. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I almost didn't watch the show. I think I watched it because of uh TikTok edits. So shout out to TikTok.
yeah. um, no, the TikTokification of many things could be a whole different episode,
Yeah.
but um,
Yes, because I should also say that they, as much as they got me to watch the show, they also spoiled the fuck out of it, and I
no,
would
of
have
course,
liked to see what
of course. I
my
mean,
reaction would have been. Like to the Chimere reveal in particular, that
oh,
was fully spoiled, and like I would have loved to see what
content farms got to get theirs
Marshall's
too.
reaction.
That's
Yeah,
that's what it is, right? It's the same videos you see all the time. It's a clip in the background with the AI voice over the top,
yeah,
claiming to have like an informed take on the show.
right.
um, but the the last in I don't even know if I want to call this spicy. This is just honestly just fucking clownery.
Yes.
Because it's the type of review that hits like Poe's law for me. I can't tell
Hmm.
if this person is being serious. I kind of believe they are because I know people who actually talk like this in real life. But
Yeah,
then I also know people who do this just as a troll.
yeah,
um, but anyway, the review is a 1 star. Like, first of all, this person couldn't figure out how to half start, which was funny to me.
yeah.
um, but it was, this is the end of Star Wars. The rogue, liberal, gay, communist, and feminists have fully invaded every male hobby, space, and interest and destroyed it with their demonic evil ideology. This show makes me sick. Lesbian space witches, creating life, destroying all continuity and lore about Anakin simply for communist identity politics.
You see what I'm saying about like the bro? Like what? Your obsession with Anakin, it is weird. Like it is weird. Like the fact that I mean that really has to be examined. The fact like that is thrown in as you know you're
Yes.
listing liberal, gay, communists, and feminists. You know, invading male hobby spaces, whatever, like lesbian space wishes, and and harming Anakin's reputation. Like this.
When I
That is
laughed
crazy.
when I read this review for the first time. I laughed in a way that would get me rejected from judgment.
Yeah.
I laughed in such a way where St. Peter would be like, "Nah, we can't have you here, fam." But this is it's funny to me because it's funny to me on multiple levels because like my politics brain first of all goes liberal. The statement liberal, gay, communist just doesn't make sense.
Yes.
Um, but then this idea that, like you said, this Anakin has been ruined by this show. Like we've talked about it multiple times just in this interview alone.
Hmm.
But it is nothing about this show ruins Anakin. That's the thing.
And it just
Is
shows me, if I don't know, it's like
mm,
if I'm articulating this well, it almost shows that like how little faith you have in Anakin Invader
yeah. Well,
to say that something like this in
you
any way diminishes his legacy. Like
well they have
it's
so little faith in him. They don't understand his story.
Right.
And it's like they don't understand it on the most basic level. That's the thing that bothers me, is because the
Yeah.
story of Darth Vader, as he's written in the original trilogy, is the story of a guy who becomes a tragic hero.
Yes.
It is the story of a guy who is doing what he's doing because it's what he's been taught to do.
Right.
And he only realizes at the very end that if he wants to save his son and himself, he has to reject all of that.
Right.
Right? And so but even to reject, even so, you don't even understand that part of it, which is just the most basic thing. That's just 3 movies of Anakin lore right there, right?
Right.
And you just throw all that out of the window. Then you go back to the prequels. Yes, Anakin is this special virgin birth. This is just George Lucas writing his Christian myth, honestly. That's all it is.
It is.
But it's this is George Lucas wanting to subvert the Christian myth by making Christ, in this case, the bad guy. So we get the whole prequel trilogy. You don't understand that, because to say that anything about Anakin is ruined in the prequel trilogy is just, that's Star Wars blasphemy to me.
Right.
And then just to ignore all the other shit we have about Vader and Anakin, right? Like I said before, Darth Vader, for a lot of Star Wars media, is the embodiment of badassery. He is Black Air Force energy all the time, right? He comes out and he is looking to throw hands because you looked at the guy funny.
Right.
All he wants to do is go out there, take his lightsaber, and do lightsaber shit.
Right.
He does not care about anything else. He is so fundamentally broken. He is so become this thing that is Darth Vader, this absolute killing machine, that he stops caring about everything else around him, does Palpatine's will because Palpatine tells him to go kill stuff, and so that gives him an excuse.
Right.
Right.
And the thing is what's also crazy to me is, like, I never realized how much stock people put into the creation myth of Anakin, that they were so offended at even potentially trotting anywhere near that, because to me it's like I never really think about that aspects. In fact, I had to remind myself, it's been so long since I've seen episode 1, I was like, I had to remind myself, like, what the fuck they were even talking about. And the thing is that because that wasn't what made Anakin special. That is what made the Jedi pay attention to Anakin, and that is what made them allow Anakin into their order at such a old age. But that is not what made Anakin special.
No.
What made Anakin special was, like, he is that talented character. Like, he is that one rare Star Wars character that is actually comes out the gate just super fucking talented and special. And multiple characters are not like that, and that is actually more normal. So the thing is like, it's what's interesting is that they're so upset about Osha and May potentially, like, trotting on Anakin's toes, but yet they are seemingly expecting Anakin from them and are disappointed when they're not. And that's why I feel like that's how I feel like I know that they're not really Star Wars fans. It's like all they've seen and really liked of Star Wars is the prequel, the one series that has the, like, that truly follows the, like, really special, talented white male character. And that is what they love. And anything else just cannot measure up to that. The sequel films, other than just being a mess, Kylo dies. So there goes that, there goes that figure for them. Right. Like, the Acolyte. And that is one of the overt criticisms is that there are too few white people in it. What was that? Let me see if I can see that meme. Yes. The Acolyte is hailed by Disney shills for its diversity, but in a huge cast list, there are only 2 white characters of any significance. One dies in the first 5 minutes, the other kills himself in episode 2, right?
Yes.
So it's like, Which is funny because everybody dies in that show except for 4 fucking people. One is green, 2 are black twins, and the other one is Asian.
Also,
it's like everybody, it is an equal opportunity death. A black man dies, an alien girl dies, white girl dies, white man dies. You know, a Wookiee dies. Like aliens die. Everybody's dying. Like Asian man, everybody's dying. Like
what happens when you wave a fucking lightsaber around? People get
black
killed.
Woman dies. every representative of the diversity dies in that show. Equal opportunity death. Like
yes, it is that criticism that whole thing was also wild to me because I'll just say it here. What I said in the chat after you posted that is, I just want to remind certain people it's supposed to be a dog whistle, not a fucking foghorn. All right,
right.
You are telling on yourself a little too much.
Way too much. What's the thing is like that's where it goes back to what I'm saying. Like all these criticisms that don't at least in some way mention elements of the show, right? Like you are obviously telling on yourself. Like all I'm hearing is I'm racist and I hate seeing black and Asian people on my screen. Like it fundamentally bothers me. Like, and the only thing I liked about Star Wars was the talented white guy, and anything that's not a talented white man, I hate. Like,
I mean that's certainly a large part of the criticism, and I recognize that coming out of the gaming space.
Yeah.
Is there's so many games that have been review bombed for things like that. I mean, Assassin's Creed is going through it again right now.
Exactly.
It's wild to me. I mean, who fucking cares if Yasuke was an actual samurai or not? Yasuke in Assassin's Creed is going to be fucking cool. Like,
and it's just so crazy because it's like these people. This is the segment, but like so many people ride so hard for Japanese culture, like even over the voices of Japanese people themselves. Multiple of them have said, hey, like this person existed, we call him a samurai. You know, like there's a whole argument about whether or not he was actually a samurai or was he just a retainer. And it's like multiple Japanese people and like Japanese normal people and historians have come up and been like, no, like he is a samurai. Like we talk about him.
It's also like, just please stop looking for historical accurate Assassin's Creed. It's not fucking there.
It's fucking fiction. That's what bothers me so much. It's like, you know, and you see it in all kinds of fiction. Even historical fiction. This isn't a fucking documentary.
No, the history is the backdrop. The history is not the point.
You can do whatever the fuck you want to do with it. And if you don't fucking watch it.
The history is not the meal. The history is the seasoning. Like, that's all it is.
Exactly. It's like, people talking about like historical accuracy for Game of Thrones. I'm like, fuck, you guys are driving me insane.
Historical accuracy. Look, people did it with fucking Lord of the Rings. It's not historically. When does Lord of the Rings take place, my guy?
Right. Please tell me.
Please define for me the period in human history that was referred to as the third era of mankind.
Right. And I think that there are some. Actually, what's funny is I didn't watch Rings of Power. I'm just watching it now. I will say, I probably have more problems with Rings of Power than I do the Acolyte, but that's only because I like Star Wars a little more than I do Lord of the Rings, and I think that I also think that like it's not that it was badly done. There's only one aspect of the show of Rings of Power that interests me is the problem. So everything else I find very boring.
Well, let me put it this way: Lord of the Rings is not really as entertaining as people make it seem. Exactly. I took a whole fucking college course on this and had to read through the Silmarillion. Yeah. The Silmarillion is chloroform in the form of a book.
Yes, it is so boring. Now that being said, I have read it, so it's wrong. Like they do a lot of it really wrong, and so like I think when I first watched it, I was starting to get a headache because I was like, I just don't even know where we are anymore. But then I read later that it's because they never sold them the rights. Yeah. The family never sold them the rights to like actually the Silmarillion. So they had to change stuff for legal reasons, and they compressed a lot. And so but anyway, all that is to say that like it still has merit and interest to me. I don't think it's as bad as people make it sound.
No. But
my only problem is that there are significant parts of it that I find very boring and that I just don't care about. But that being said, I think a lot of the attitudes are similar here, right? It's like they see black people on screen and lose their fucking shit. Like, and this is worse. And I think the reaction to this show is worse than Rings of Power because even at least with Rings of Power, the main characters are all white, but because they couldn't really do much about that, right? Because they are drawing from actual characters that we've seen in the movies, right? So, but just having side characters that are black and they're enraged, and now here you see centering, like a large franchise centering Black, Asian,
Mm-hmm.
So like, first of all, I mean, a lot of things in like Black and Asian characters, you know, female main characters, which isn't new, but it's just like the Black and female thing. And then also, I think what was interesting to me is to have this, light, not super explored romance
Mm-hmm.
between a Black woman and an Asian man, which we haven't seen. I don't think I've seen since Cinderella. I was like, I was
Nope.
like, Cinderella, you never see it. It's very, very, very rare. And trust me, I went and looked. I was like, is there any other stuff like this so I can at least get my fix a little bit? No, there isn't.
Nope.
Very, very rare. So I think all of that, the non-centering of whiteness in any
Mm-hmm.
respect, I think it all
Oh yeah. Nope.
kind of melded together to make this outrage,
Yeah.
right? I think that also the fact that it's sort of for kids, so it's like missing a lot of sophistication, which people really, really expect from fantasy and sci-fi shows now. We've kind of been spoiled for really sophisticated sci-fi fantasy franchises lately
Oh yeah.
that are very adult. So I think this is not in line with most of that, and I think that kind of, helped things along too. I think that um,
It
uh,
is.
I think people expected one thing
Mm-hmm.
perhaps and got another, you
Well,
know.
it's crazy to me because it is what they're really mad at. Like the core of this is what the actual critics seem to be criticizing the show for. The thing that they're upset by is that this show represents a maturation for Star Wars.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
is that it asks questions that honestly real fans of Star Wars have been asking forever, right?
Absolutely.
But puts them on screen and actually sets them up as further implications for the Star Wars universe, right?
Yes.
It says pretty much directly to your face that the things you have been taught about the dark and light side may not necessarily be true, right?
Right. And
That
I think that's why I've like so like I've especially I think after the sequel films I lost my taste for Star Wars a little bit and for multiple reasons. One, the fans. The way the fans acted over the sequel films was just like every movie was just so atrocious that
oh
I could have probably burned Star Wars happily to the ground at one point and laughed at their face.
yeah.
It just pissed me off so much. Like, and then I really felt like the franchise, like many people weren't really doing enough to protect these people from that, and as well as it wasn't just like the actors got a lot of hate, and I really hated that, but female fans got so much fucking harassment
Oh yeah.
also. And I felt like there just wasn't, at least, okay, like whatever. It's like there's not much you could do like on the fandom side of things. But I really I was really disappointed in how little it
hmm
seemed like Disney was protecting at least the actors, right? To the
Well,
point where it even felt that they were like playing into some of that
oh yeah.
like discrimination and hatred to placate people, right? Like with like changing posters and whatnot in China. So
hmm
I was really disillusioned with that. And so but I think that this show was so much. And the other thing I was disillusioned with, other than the fan behavior, yes, I think we talked about this a little bit in the Discord, but it's like they had an opportunity to do things in the sequel films that I would have liked to see, explorations of what balance in the force really means, explorations of like what dark and light really mean, that they just didn't take for whatever multiple varied reasons, writing, blah blah
Yeah.
blah. And that also, I was like, so we're just never gonna ever gonna get this.
It
So this show to
was.
me was a breath of fresh air. Is more of what I was looking for, right?
I
Like
think it
a true
was.
exploration of the dark and the light that is more nuanced
Yeah.
and grounded in reality of human nature, right?
hmm
Moving out of the Skywalker saga that has been played to death, like moving into like more like historical elements that aren't,
hmm
that we've like heard about, but we haven't got to explore in live action.
Yeah.
I don't want to see that time era at all anymore that we've seen
Well,
in the film.
that's I gotta apologize because I got something wrong earlier. I think I said Snyder was the one who came in and erased everything Joss Whedon did. It wasn't Snyder. It was J.J. Abrams.
Right, you're right. Sorry,
um,
no, I knew that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I only say that because of something you had mentioned earlier. Is yes, they were trying. Joss Whedon was trying to take Star Wars in a different direction in
Yeah.
Episode 8.
Yes.
And it was J.J.
And
Abrams
then,
who
right.
got brought back and kind of just J.J. the that episode 9 film, right?
Yeah.
Feels like imagine if Kendrick was a bad rapper for a second
Right.
and then tried to diss Drake in the same way he did, where it's just like this scathing like diss
Yeah.
of like I
Yeah.
hate you and I wish you would die. That's what
Yeah.
episode 9 is to me from J.J. Abrams. Is it's that kind
Yeah.
of thing. It is just a
But the
giant
thing is
middle
there was
finger.
I think what was so offensive about that movie actually is that they still came so close to doing what I wanted to see,
Yeah.
and then they just killed Kylo instead. I was like,
Yeah.
you got this. Like, I was so upset the whole movie, and then there's this one shining, not scene, but like series of scenes where Kylo kind of turns back to the light and becomes Ben again, and like fights with Rey, and like there's that moment where they could have survived that right together, and then gone on to create the kind of Jedi Order, or even just Force
Yeah.
user training that I would have liked to see, right? And then they kill him instead. And I was like, fuck you. Like,
Yeah.
like truly, fuck you for that. Like, that was fucked up. Like,
It is. I mean, this is something that I've expanded on a lot, and I hope to do an actual essay on it in the future. But it's media with lost potential.
yes.
That comes from having a background in gaming, because there's a lot of games out there that I've played that have the potential to be something better than they were turned into.
Yeah.
And it sucks because it's like I see the artist's vision there, but they just never get to fucking explore it because there's too many, honestly, commercial influences saying no, it has to be something else.
Right.
I will say that the most marketable part about the sequel trilogy is seeing Adam Driver without a shirt.
Yeah.
And that's because, like, I know that, like, people think it's sexy and think it's hot. To me, it's funny because that man is a square.
No, looking at him beautiful is because I honestly do find him very attractive, but it's the kind of attractive where I'm literally questioning my sanity as I'm staring at him. I'm like, what about this man? It's just like an incongruous set of features on a really big, but like gawky kind of body. Like, I'm like, what is?
I'm sorry.
I'm like looking at him, and I'm like attracted, and I'm like, what is wrong with me?
Now,
You know, like.
I will say, I'm throwing no shade at Adam Driver's way. He was shaped like a fucking barrel in that scene. But he has gotten significantly more defined as time has gone on.
Yes, for sure.
And letting his hair outgrow was definitely the right choice because I've seen his old Marine graduation photos.
I did too, and Lord, those ears, my God.
The man looks like he could fly the fuck away.
Yeah. And then, yes, no shade to this man. I do actually appreciate like Sexy Ugly, I guess you could call it. I thought what's that actor who played I used to fight people about the actor who played Severus Snape, who Alan Rickman, who on the surface should not be attractive in the least, but that's where I learned about about Sexy Ugly.
Yeah.
I don't even think Adam Driver is quite on that level of Sexy Ugly. I think he really is more like conventionally attractive than that. But yes,
I think it's the persona that they have is that they put out this almost sort of. I try to err away from saying Machiavellian, but that's really what it is.
Yeah, and there's a charisma.
Yes.
And I think it's the talent of their acting, the intensity of that charisma that they can portray because of that talent in acting. Yeah. And I think you really get to express that in a more villainous role better, which is also why I was happy for Manny Jacinto.
Yeah.
To do that with Chimere, because you just can't channel that same level of intense charisma.
We know how it is. Villains have more fun. Like, let's just be honest. First of all, there's the example of fucking like Giancarlo Esposito just plays like the best fucking villains ever, and he's gonna be the villain in the upcoming Captain America movie.
Yeah,
so it's like people who get to play villains just have more fun. They're people who enjoy what they're doing, and because villains are kind of supposed to be unhinged, they just get to do what they want to do. Right. But then there's the example of myself. I have the last like big streaming I did on this channel was me streaming the entire Mass Effect trilogy again because I bought the remastered trilogy. And Mass Effect is one
Hmm.
of my favorite game series of all time.
Yeah.
But when I originally played Mass Effect way, way back in the day when I was in college, um, I played through the whole thing as Paragon, which is like the good thing. This was back when binary morality systems were still a thing in video games.
Right.
So I played like a whole Paragon playthrough, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm the righteous, upstanding, Commander Shepard who's saving the galaxy. And then as an adult, I played it complete Renegade, which is supposed to be the
Mm,
quote-unquote evil playstyle. And I
right.
realized Renegade is not you being evil, it's you being a dick. And I had so much fun being that dick.
Yeah.
Because it gave Shepard this aura of like, I am here to solve problems, and if you stand in my way, you become a problem.
Right.
Right? And Shepard has no problem solving you as a problem. And that usually
Hmm.
means you're catching a bullet. um,
Right.
I have a clip of one part that just made me laugh out loud, which is like a side quest and you're saving some scientist or something like that, and the scientist admit he's done something wrong, and Shepard just pulls a gun and shoots him, and it is the most hilarious fucking thing. Like just the way he flops over and the shock is like it's too funny.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I will say this is another just sort of mini tangent now that I've looked at this. I don't know why I always do this in the moment, but you had mentioned Lee Jung Jae doesn't speak any English, right?
Yeah.
And then I remember, okay, yeah, this is the guy from Squid Game.
Hmm.
And I realized why he was so good at playing Soul. Lee Jung Jae is really good at being sad on camera.
Yeah. Very much so.
Like being absolutely fucking miserable on camera.
Yes.
um,
Yeah. He brings a very soulful, like, um, um, I think that's what made him so, because it's like I said, when you walk it through the actual actions he did from the beginning, like from the beginning to the end, like maybe not the beginning of the series, but like the beginning of the timeline of events as they go, like nothing from the minute he laid eyes on Osha, like, why are you so attached to this girl? You don't even know this girl. Let this girl stay with her mom,
mhm,
please. Like,
yeah.
it's like killing her mom. That was an accident. I'll give him that. But it's like, leaping to misunderstanding conclusions about what these parents are doing with their children with very little evidence, right? Like, and killing her mom out of that, lying to her for years, letting them kick her out of the Jedi Order. You supposedly care about her so much, but did you check on her this whole time? Like, everything about his actions were terrible. But he played such a soulful,
Yeah.
like caring, like clearly, loving of Osha that
Mhm.
you kind of can't help but
Yeah.
like him
I think
despite all of his flaws.
I think that's a big missed theme in this show is the absolute parenting failure that happens.
Yeah.
Is that Mother Coral and Genesea and Soul are just frankly bad fucking parents,
Yeah,
really.
for sure.
They do what they think is right for their children, but they are so worried that they might fuck up that they don't let those children make their own decisions.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing is like a lot of these choices are just railroading these little girls. And it's so weird because it's like, and they're railroading them in like opposite ways, right? Like sort of like the Jedi actually kind of railroading May's wishes, and the witches are railroading Osha's wishes. Anastasia was the only one to really properly step back and be like, hey, like let's do what's best for them based on what they want to do. Like she's probably the best parent out of all of them.
yeah.
And then Soul kills her.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
yeah, that
Um,
was actually really wild to watch. I mean, not to say that like I wasn't surprised. I think that the characterization was actually quite on point on both sides, but it was just so frustrating to see it happen.
yeah. Well, let's do that. Well, to sum it all up, I think we're kind of. I mean, it's great to have these kinds of discussions,
Yes.
because one, we're just able to air out all the crap, all the
Mm-hmm.
toxicity we have to deal with within these fandoms. It's so much. It feels sometimes like we're swimming in a cesspool,
Yes.
um, because we see the bad takes and it's really really hard sometimes not respond to those bad takes. in this case, I wanted to do this episode to respond to a lot of these bad takes because, again, they are harming this show to a point where so many people are just not going to watch it because they buy into that
Yes.
sort of crap, and they don't want to invest any time now in it. And it's sad to me because it's like it's not even if it wasn't a great piece of work, it's sad to me to just miss out, right?
Yeah. And I think it's what you said about the bias, about people coming in with bias because of these like because of the review bombing, because of these like reviews on bandwagon hater reviews on YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it is true that it's not a good enough show to completely, like, I can't say you can come into the show with a total bias and come out of it with a totally changed mind.
Yeah.
It's not that level of a masterpiece to do that.
No.
Like Game of Thrones was. You could
Mhm.
go in having a bias against Game of Thrones and like it would change your mind. This is not that. So
Mhm.
that's why it's also so unfortunate because it's just really not giving it a fair chance. I think if you come into it unbiased, you'll
Yeah.
get something out of it. I think that if you come into it with a negative bias, your mind is just not going to be changed.
Probably not.
Yeah, and I think that the problem is that I really want to see, like I've said before, I really want to see more of this side of Star Wars, right? I want to see more of this gray morality. I want to see more of these explorations of Sith lore. I'd like to see
Mhm.
more of these exploration of the fallible Jedi. I'd like to see the High Galactic era.
Mhm.
I would like to see more Sith that aren't just angry and hatred, right? Like the other
Yeah.
sides of the dark side. Like so I think that because this is the first, if you flame it so badly, you are cutting off that avenue for Star Wars. And so,
Mhm.
regardless of, even if you aren't fully sold on the show and you have problems with it, which you are entitled to have, I think that it is unfair to ruin the rest of this direction for everybody else because you don't like this one show,
Yeah.
you know?
And that's honestly a perfect summary.
Yeah.
No notes, but I think we're both in alignment on we kind of know why the show got the hate it did.
Yeah.
Um, we're very much in alignment on that, and I mean it's again it sucks. It's unfair, but
Yeah.
that's the world we live in now. um,
Yeah.
but what I really want to talk
Yeah,
about
and
to.
I think it's funny. Hold on, I will say I
Hmm.
think it's funny that they're saying that the woke agenda has ruined Star
Hmm.
Wars when it's really that racist, like reactionary rhetoric that is ruining
Oh yeah, these are
fandoms all over the place. Yeah,
these are the same guys that will tell you to keep politics out of stuff and everything
yeah.
like that. And I'm like,
And then the
motherfucker,
first
you're
ones to
making
bring
it
politics into it.
political.
Yeah,
But that's just a realization that they believe that their politics are the default setting.
right.
And it again, it's just a terrible way to look at things. Again, I am asking people, I am begging people. Like when I say touch grass, it's not a meme anymore. Go the fuck
Yeah,
outside.
it's
Talk
really
to
not.
real human beings.
Like,
But no, what I really want to sort of be our end cap here
hmm
is the bigger things that the Acolyte really sets up for the Star Wars universe as a whole, right?
yeah.
Because yes, we're kind of end with that. We do end off on that kind of sequel bait note, um,
hmm
but the entire story throughout plays with again that sort of myth we've been taught about Star Wars, that there's a
hmm
definite divide between light and dark, that divide is meant to be maintained, that the light side people are inherently right and the dark side people are
hmm
inherently bad, that the light side is inherently good and the dark side is is inherently evil, that we have this divide between lawful good and chaotic evil. um,
Right.
and it, first of all, lawful good, we call it lawful stupid for experienced D&D players. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
but we have such a strong divide throughout Star Wars, but I believe that's the propaganda that we've been taught, and
Yes,
it's
and I
propaganda that doesn't come externally. It's propaganda that comes from within the fiction itself.
right. And if the fourth is this sort of let's say wholly, for lack of a better word, non-entity entity, right? Then why would we have the dark side? Like, why would we need this balance, right? If the light was so right, why would we need both sides? And that question has not yet been properly explored and answered in Star Wars, and it is starting it has long since been frustrating me. And I think that
Yeah.
this is probably the closest we've gotten to exploring it, and I'd like to see it flesh out further,
Yeah. And I'm sorry for all the people who may think we're going down this route. I have to tell you, because this was iterated in a very passionate speech by, what was his fucking name? Um,
Freddie
I'm
Prinze
sorry.
Jr.?
Matthew
That
Lillard.
one? Oh, never mind.
Maybe it was
I'm thinking
Freddie Prinze
another
Jr.
passionate.
or Matthew.
He
I
went
have
on
to
a
look
very
it up.
passionate rant about the Force that I fully agree with. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Was it Freddie Prinze Jr.?
Yeah, talking about how he was like,
Oh yeah.
he wrote that story. He was
Sorry.
like, he talked to George Lucas about this, and he,
You're right.
uh,
I don't.
why Palpatine didn't kill Anakin. He seduced Anakin to the dark side, but to balance that out, the twins had to be born. And
Yeah.
yes, that is exactly what I'm talking about. Like that
Okay.
mechanism of the Force that George Lucas
Hmm.
envisioned in the Force very strongly. If that is true,
Yeah.
then we cannot continue to totally condemn the dark side as evil to be gotten rid of. And
Well.
it's a stupid and futile way of pursuing things because they're always going to pop back up,
Yeah.
right? It's always going to try to correct itself. So there's
Yes.
got to be a better path forward,
Well,
right?
exactly. And beyond that, I mean, what he really said, what really spoke to me when he said it, is Grey Jedi are fucking fan fiction. Please
Yeah.
just erase
Yeah.
that idea from your mind.
Yeah.
The people who find balance in the Force are not going to go on to be like quote unquote Grey Jedi. They're going to be
Right.
something entirely new to Star Wars.
Right. Well, and that's what's so fascinating to me because the Jedi speak about balance all the time, but how balanced can they really be though?
They
And
can't be.
exactly. And that's what's so interesting to me. Oh, I want to see that explored more. So,
Well,
like, that is really when you get into what to me makes sci-fi great, right? Is those kinds of questions.
yeah. And I mean it's throughout it's throughout a whole lot of sci-fi, right? There's a whole lot that we spoke on after I watched Dune Part 2.
Yes.
About how Dune Part 2 captures religious zealotry really, really well.
Yeah.
Especially in a particular one of its characters. How people take advantage of that religious zealotry to
Yes.
make moves for power. And how you can create this myth of good triumphing over evil. And that myth puts people in power who should not be in power.
Yes.
And that really is the entire story of the Jedi in Star Wars.
Yeah. I will. Yeah. This is a separate conversation, but yeah, what annoys me about the movies of Dune versus the book is that the book does a much better job because the whole first book is a very traditional hero story, right? Like Paul's the chosen one. He wins. He gets his revenge. He helps the Fremen. He like liberates the Fremen. Everything is beautiful and good and amazing, and this is badass, right?
Yeah.
And then you get to the second book, and you're like, "What the fuck happened?" You don't like they were really heavy-handed with the religious zealotry, like
Yeah.
foreshadowing. That wasn't foreshadowing; it was a brick to the fucking face. Like they were way too heavy-handed with it because in the book, like it is a shock. Like Paul is doing his best. He is a relatively good leader, but it's the idea that you cannot rule religiously without inviting corruption. Even if you are doing everything that you should be doing, right? Everybody around you will descend into corruption. And that is such an important point that I also feel like is sort of true to a less like extreme point with the Jedi because there are religious elements to what the Jedi are doing. And even if maybe they are not corrupt as an institution themselves, it just it invites this reactionary, like how at fault, even if the Jedi are a force for good and embodying the light, if the Force has to correct itself with the dark, right?
Yeah.
Aren't they then responsible at some
Kind
point
of.
for the existence of the Sith? Like
They are because they are overbearing. Is the problem.
exactly.
Is the issue for Star Wars in general, and the issue for Star Wars fans, is that this idea of maintaining the balance has always been well, the Jedi are just going to sit on Coruscant and be peacekeepers of the Republic. That is the aesthetic of balance of the Force.
Right.
But the Force has never truly been in balance. It's all, as far as the galaxy is concerned, it has always swung in the extremes one way or the other.
And
Because the
it's going to keep
Republic
swinging
is,
until you really balance it out. That's the thing. It's like you're going to keep inviting, yes, like that's what's called Star Wars. You're going to keep being at war. It will never stop unless you properly like balance it out, right? Like, or it's just going to keep swinging through these extremes. And again, that's what the sequels fail to address. That is so frustrating. Like, what was the point of them then? What was the point? Like,
who knows? But that's where the Acolyte really sets things up going forward in Star Wars, is it does begin to start asking those questions. What happens when a Jedi actually falls? Right?
Yeah. And it's super interesting because it is showing the balance, because in Osha swinging to the dark, May is sort of presumably going to swing to the light.
Yeah.
So that is balanced out with the two. Yeah, super interesting to see what they would do going forward.
It's balanced out, but it is that idea of what happens when a Jedi falls. What happens when someone who has rejected the Force their entire life finally embraces one side of it with such fervor, right?
Yes.
What happens when there is, instead of just getting this sneaky Palpatine-esque character, what happens when you have someone who seems to understand so much more about what the Sith were before the Old Republic and the High Republic starts training someone, right?
Right.
And
also what will happen to them, right? Yeah. Because it's like, especially if you see Darth Plagueis or whatever, right? That means, but like, he's got to survive, and he's got to have another student that actually, that goes on to kill him, which means that Chimera and Osha can't survive, right? So what happens to bridge that gap, right?
He's got to train little boy Sheev. I always find that hilarious. Palpatine's first name is canonically Sheev. And every time I see him, especially among Star Wars fans who love Palpatine, I just call him Sheev, but they hate it. No, it also has implications for the Jedi as a whole. Like, yes, we do get to see the sort of fallible part, but what happens when the checks and balances start coming in, right? What happens when the Senate does get overview? Or rather, what happens when the rest of the Jedi Order finds out what Venestra hid? How are they going to react to that information?
Yes, and that's so interesting to see Yoda pop up, because it's like, because what will he see her doing, or what will he will he be suspicious of her?
Yes, that's the thing. The expectations is like, oh yeah, Yoda would definitely check Venestra and put her in her place, but we also know that Yoda lived know Yoda lived through a time, because of the prequel trilogy, Yoda lived through a time where he tolerated a lot of the bullshit that Jedi hid.
Absolutely. And he was side by side with Anakin, Palpatine.
Right? Because with Yoda...
let's talk. Hold on. There's another thing here. That reminds me. Someone was like, I remember seeing some meme. It was like after episode 5, where they're like, when Chimera, the stranger, kind of descends, behind them, and they kind of turn around, and it takes a while for them to notice his presence. Like, Soul's the first to be like, what the fuck is that? And turns around, they all turn around, and they're like, oh my god, all these Jedi, and they wouldn't sense a Sith right behind them. And then it's a cut to the prequels, where all these Jedi are standing in the room with fucking Senator Palpatine just chilling, including Yoda. Why'd you? It's bro,
exactly. The whole thing, the whole prequel trilogy was about how the dark side was clouding their vision.
Exactly. Right.
And beyond that, it's also just, especially with these Old Republic Jedi, is, again, they believe the Sith are gone. They have no experience with anything like this. So they, even if they do feel it, they don't know what the fuck that feeling is.
Right. And the thing is, with Yoda and Venestra, it's less about her turning to the dark side, and so it would be more about what she's kind of done in her past, right? She may or may not be actually looking for.
I don't expect her to fall to the dark side. And if she does fall, I expect her to fall in what we've seen as kind of the shittiest way possible, where it's you're a Jedi who got caught in a lie, so you use this fall to the dark side as your saving grace, and those always end up as the most pathetic Sith we've ever seen.
Right. Well, and I don't think we've fully seen a Jedi be fully wrong
Mm-hmm.
Even in their thought process, right? Where
Yeah.
like even their like soul was like well, I guess what I mean, we haven't seen a Jedi be fully corrupt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And still kind of be
No. We've
still
seen.
in the light without falling. And I think that would be interesting. I think Vanestra might be that first person because even with Soul wasn't necessarily corrupt in his thinking. He was just overzealous
Yeah.
in his misunderstanding. But he really thought he was doing good. But for some, and I guess the question is, can someone still be in the light and
Mm-hmm.
be corrupt like that? But I think
Well,
Vanestra would be a decent exploration of whether that's possible.
Venestra is an exploration of that, but Torben kind of gives us our answer in the
Oh,
show,
true. That's facts.
right?
That is true.
So Torben's desire to get back to Coruscant is really that's what people seem to keep missing. Torben's desire to go back to Coruscant is what causes the conflict between the Witch Coven and the Jedi. He desires it so strongly that he is willing to allow someone who is using quote unquote the dark side to invade his mind and convince him if he does these things they will get him home. And they
Right.
do, but he pays dearly for that.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And in that moment he is made to understand what his mistake is. To the point
Yeah.
that we don't hear another word out of Torben for the entire fucking show. Until he
Right. I
dies.
think what keeps Corbin in the light is that guilt and that
Yes.
understanding that he was wrong. And so he is reflecting
So,
and paying penance, right? But
yes.
Vanestra does not seem to feel that way
No.
at all. Like I don't
But
think she thinks that what she did is wrong at all, even
yeah.
though she clearly
She believes
beats it out of
ultimately what she believes is she's ultimately protecting the Jedi Order, right?
Right.
Because she's not questioning whether the Jedi Order is right or wrong. In her mind, the Jedi Order is always right, right?
Yeah.
Because
Right.
what she's truly protecting is her own power as a Jedi
Yeah.
Master, right?
Yeah.
She believes if this external oversight from the Senate comes in and gets with the Jedi, yes, we've seen how that can corrupt and influence the Jedi in bad ways. The Jedi should not be involved in galactic politics. We learned that the
Yeah.
hard way.
Right.
But also that this external overview of the Jedi will question her authority,
Yeah.
essentially. And she
And
does
I
not want to
wonder
lose any of that.
I'd like to see like what happens with that in the sense of how this will inform Yoda's own
Yeah.
relationship with the Senate in the prequel films as the head of the Jedi,
Yeah.
right?
And I think that's the biggest fear of some Star Wars fans is that we may see Yoda make a misstep here. Is that
Yeah.
the character that we've been taught is so wise and so infallible and so good-hearted and knows what he's doing and knows what he's talking about may come to make a decision that we would not expect.
But the thing is, he made mistakes in the prequels. Like the thing is
Yeah.
that he comes and he gets closer. Like you said, it's like he's lived long enough to make these mistakes to get closer,
Yeah.
or to get closer to that Jedi ideal or further along the path to it. And so, in order to get further along the path, he's got to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So,
And that's
but
true.
yeah,
And
I
I
don't think
mean,
people are prepared for that. And in the same way that people weren't prepared to see the Jedi make mistakes at all.
yeah.
So,
And his mistakes do take some reading between the lines and it dives deeper into
mhm.
Star Wars lore, which I won't get into, but
Yeah,
it is allowing the clones to exist is his single largest
yeah,
mistake.
yeah.
When it's found out that Quinlan Voss had gone to Camino to start the clone project,
Hmm.
um, Quinlan Voss, first of all, great character in Star Wars lore. Please read stuff about Quinlan Voss. But when Yoda figured that out, like if I was Yoda in that situation, I'd be like immediately, all right, find out where the fuck Quinlan Voss is, bring him in, shut down this clone thing on Camino immediately, tell the Senate right now, right?
Hmm.
Like expose this for what it is, and then the prequel doesn't have to happen, right?
Yeah,
But then we have to go through this mess of the Clone Wars and Anakin's fall to the dark side, and we
right.
see through the actual Clone Wars series, Anakin is like progressively getting closer to the dark side as time
Yeah.
goes on. Um, in that he wasn't always like just immune to it until the whole thing with Padme came up. Um,
Yeah.
so it's a whole lot. I'm appreciative of the Acolyte because of what it does for Star Wars. Is that
Right.
it does take us. I keep saying it over and over again, but I gotta stress the point is that it does take us finally in a potentially new direction for this
Yes.
IP.
Yeah. And that's why I would argue, I would say, not that I'm anyone, not like I feel like I'm an expert enough to necessarily judge, but I feel like I am enough of a fan and steeped in fandoms in general to say you are not a true Star Wars fan. If you can be a true Star Wars fan and not like the Acolyte, that's fine. Not everyone has to like it. As long as your reasons are legitimate, people are different. But I don't understand how you could be a true Star Wars fan and understand that this show is important for taking us in a different direction. And if you were a true Star Wars fan, you would want to see that direction that we're going in. And for that reason alone, you should at least respect the Acolyte. You don't have to like it or enjoy it, but you should at least respect it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, with that, I think we've said our piece at this point.
Thoroughly.
Yes. All I wish for anyone who does watch this stream now or in the future, thank you guys for watching. We always appreciate it. Please, if you haven't seen The Acolyte, we encourage you to just give it a shot, right? It's going to cost you an hour of your time to watch one episode of this.
It's serious, It's worth
yes.
checking out.
Beyond that, again, thank you everyone who's watching now, who will watch in the future. We appreciate each and every one of you. As always, if you like what we do, what you see, what you hear, please follow us here on Spacetime TALKO. You can find me, of course, at Little Teapot. Gigi, you didn't share a handle with me, but is there any social media you would like someone to follow you at?
Sure. I'm on Twitter as Femme de la Gauche, so FEMMEDELAGAUCHE. And I rant about random fan things on Twitter.
There you go. Please go follow my friend Gigi on Twitter. Don't rant at her because she has teeth.
I will fight back.
But yeah. So again, I'm going to try to make this a regular series. I'm trying to get guests lined up for it. Gigi, of course, I will ask you again if anything relevant comes up in our discussions going forward.
Of course.
Always a good thing to have repeat guests. But we're going to try to make this a regular thing and keep it going. But that's all we got for tonight, folks. So again, thank you for tuning in. Have a good night.
Have a good one. Bye.